I'd like to call to order this committee of the whole meeting of the town of Saugeen Shores and extend a welcome to everyone in the chambers this evening. The first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of your responsibility to do so. You can do so now or when it arises on the agenda. Nothing. Then this evening we have 3 deputations, and the first is Scott Berry from OPG, and he's here for an update. Welcome, Scott.
First, I'd like to just step back a bit and talk a bit about our company. We're the largest energy producer here in the Ontario, and we had a very successful year, both financially and operationally. It was one of our best years in many, many years. In fact, we achieved our greatest safety record as a company for over 100 years, of which we're very proud on our sustained performance. Last year, we also became the largest energy producer of clean energy in the province, where all of our generation assets, so including our 65 hydroelectric stations, thermal and nuclear stations, are now 99.7% free of smog and greenhouse emissions. That was not without its challenges. As we were directed by the province on our energy policy, we were successful in burning the last piece of coal last year. And Atikokan is now biomass. It's one of the first in North America. It's 100% biomass. So we've been successful in converting some of our thermal stations to new renewable fuel sources. And we're quite proud of what we've accomplished. And we're recognized in North America as the cleanest provider of energy. We also do this fairly economically. We're the lowest producer of energy here in the province. We help bring our costs down. We've been investing for many years now in business transformation and reducing our headcount and continuing to find efficiencies in our productions and our operations. We also, as a corporation, we do have a single shareholder, and the single shareholder happens to be the province of Ontario. So all of our profits are returned back to the province, and last year we returned back $811 million in profits to the province, which comes back to the ratepayer in helping moderate the price of electricity in the province. So our strong focus still very much around holding our costs down, finding efficiencies, and investing in the reliability of our power. Turning now to more of the nuclear performance of our 2 major assets, Pickering and Darlington. A good successful year for them as well. We achieved part of our profits for our company were actually realized through a net increase in overall nuclear generation by both of our assets. Darlington continues to be a top performer in the world. For the last 5 years, it's been fully satisfactory by the CNSC, the highest marks achieved and the only one in Canada to achieve that. As well as recognized by our peers around the world as achieving the highest performance possible. Darlington's a significant workhorse in Ontario in providing good baseload electricity from nuclear, but it's also reaching its midway point in its life where key components and reactors need to be refurbished. So we've been very focused, a laser-like focus on cost and schedule for this project and refurbishment for about the last 5 to 6 years in preparing for it. This is a critical year for us. We'll be going forth to the government and to our board with our final cost, our final production estimate, and the details of the refurbishment project. That'll result in an additional 30 years of clean, affordable power with Darlington, but we've done big projects as a company over many years, but this by far will be our biggest, and one of which will be really tested in terms of our ability to deliver on time and on schedule for that effort, and we think we're well prepared. We've still got more work to do over the months ahead in preparation for the fall, and the first unit, if it's approved, is anticipated to begin refurbishment in 2016, and it'll be about a 13-year campaign. The first unit will come down. We'll make sure that we analyze and review the success of that unit. Then we'll start refurbishing additional units, partially overlapped as we move forward. Pickering also achieved some very excellent performance. It was the one station of all Canadian utilities as recognized by the CNSC of increased performance. The case for Pickering, about 7 years ago, we looked at refurbishment of Pickering. The economics weren't there, but nonetheless, we continue to invest significant amounts of money to ensure strong reliability of Pickering through its end of life, which is scheduled for 2020, when it will be removed from the provincial grid. Turning more locally to our operations here in the community, I want to talk just briefly about our Western Waste Management Facility. That's where we manage the low and intermediate level waste along with the used fuel. With this operation, again, a good safety record. We're very pleased. We've gone almost 3 years now without a lost time accident for our employees. Our skilled drivers, which transport our radioactive materials on the provincial highways. I'm very proud of their record over almost a decade of safe travel of over 3 million kilometers traveled, which would be about 85 times circumnavigating the world. So they're highly skilled and very passionate about their job. Used fuel storage, safely process those at our 3 facilities at Pickering, Darlington, and Bruce Power. One area in which our performance was not where we'd like it to be was in our incinerator. The reliability of the equipment was not where we'd like it to be, so it was offline longer than we'd hoped. But we don't operate our equipment unless they're reliable. And in fact, one of the reasons the incinerator was offline was the stack monitor, which must be online continuously to measure emissions, was out of calibration. We had to take a couple of months to refurbish the stack monitor. Even though the incinerator could run, we didn't have the assurances that we could fully understand the potential emissions from the operation. We're investing heavily in the incinerator. It was brought down on Thursday for a 3-month outage, so we're entering into a long campaign right now to refurbish a lot of the equipment and replace some of the components, and expect that performance next year to return to the level we'd like to see it at. We're also focusing a lot on enhanced minimization efforts, both with our staff at source of segregating the materials, as well as going into a couple of pilot projects into waste that's currently been stored for a while. We're retrieving that. We're able to remove some of that and reprocess that and reduce the overall volume. So we're looking at a number of ways and opportunities on pilot projects to enhance our efficiencies and our capabilities. That's sort of the update in terms of the operations, both for our company, our nuclear performance, as well as our local operations. And just like to finish up with just a quick update on the Deep Geologic Repository. If you recall, this is a critical project that we've been at for many years, well over a decade. This is a community-driven project that really asked for a permanent solution this generation, so it's not a burden on future generations. We're proud as a company of the stewardship of what we do in terms of the projects we do. As I mentioned, we have 65 hydroelectric facilities around Ontario. Our employees work in those communities. We very much rely on the environment, the water, to maintain those. Just a reminder, the goal is to find a permanent solution to safely store and dispose of the waste over long periods of time. And we need to assure ourselves and the regulator and those that are looking at this project that it will safely protect the environment, the lake, and the public. And most importantly, it's looking at the geoscience of the rock that's deep underneath that will provide that all-important geosphere to help protect the biosphere above ground. The project status in terms of the process, as I mentioned, we've been at this for quite some time. There's been 14 years of scientific study. A lot of the evidence and the substantive issues in supporting the safety case has been presented through the federal review, which is now in the 3rd year and continues to be validated by federal agencies as well as international experts. I can safely say that this is the most comprehensive and science-based review of a nuclear waste project ever in Canadian history. The process has been very open and transparent, and many voices have been heard, over 200 interveners and participants throughout this process, and those voices are still involved in those conversations. We continue with extensive outreach efforts, both here in Ontario as well as the U.S., and all of those voices that have information to share and want to have those conversations around the table, we're heavily engaged with a lot of that work. In terms of the federal review process, this is the critical job that the Joint Review Panel has before it to examine all of the facts and the science that's been put forward by both us as the proponent, the government agencies, and all of the interveners and the participants that have shared with the JRP their thoughts and evidence before the panel. Back in the fall, following 33 days of public hearings, the public registry closed. So that was the signal that the Joint Review Panel felt they had sufficient information to undertake their mandate, which was to review this and assure themselves that through an environmental assessment it could do the job it was designed to do to protect the environment. So they're hard at work in preparing their final report. The report will include the recommendations, their own conclusions, and the rationale for all of those conclusions and recommendations, which will be included in their report. We've been informed by the Secretariat that we can anticipate the JRP to release the report on May 6th. There may be a 24-hour period where the minister actually takes receipt of the report and the minister sort of goes through the formal process of, okay, I've got it, and we can release it to the public. So it'll be then made available to the public. We'll be posting it on our web, and I suspect SIA will post the English version. Under federal language laws, there's also a 2-month period for them. They anticipate to translate the full document, the report, into French. From there, so it's on the minister's desk. The minister's desk will have 120 days to evaluate. But this is just one step and many steps throughout this process, and many more steps still to continue. The Secretariat's also announced that the public will also have an opportunity to review the report and make their comments available to the minister to reflect on and include those in their final decision. And there's participant funding that's been allowed for that as well, so we expect the minister to gratefully accept those comments. Now, the comments are restricted to previously registered participants, so those that were involved in the process, have been involved in the review, have that opportunity to review the report and comment to the minister. From there, the minister will render a decision around the environmental assessment, and so we'll wait and see what that decision entails. Just as a reminder, this is still not a license to prepare the site or construct the DGR. That's what this application is about. That would still need to be returned back to the Joint Review Panel that would have to hold a reflections and possible meeting on a future license. So that's an update on the DGR and our operations, and we'd be happy to entertain any questions from Mayor or Council. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Scott. And first of all, I apologize. I was to do the tour, but I had a double book that day. But thanks for the offer. I've been to it many times anyway.
Appreciate that.
Councillor Grace.
We didn't cut your power off.
You are granted the license to construct. How long do you think that the construction would take?
We still would need to see the report from the JRP. We anticipate a number of recommendations and baskets. We'll also want to reflect on the report, as will others will. And we'll have to evaluate that as a business and with our board. So we still have some internal review to do. We also stopped the engineering at 50%. We did not advance the full engineering of the DGR pending the report and the recommendations that may emerge. So we need to conduct some additional engineering to complete the engineering of the project. We anticipate that might take upwards to 2 years before we'd actually begin to put a shovel in the ground. The actual construction of driving the shaft and drilling the chambers deep underground could take anywhere from 6 to 8 years. I mean, I think you kind of add it all together before it may be operational, by which we would be in a position to go forward for a license to actually operate the DGR. Could be up to 8 to 10.
Okay. So if I could, I'd like to ask just a couple of questions about the hosting agreement with regard to the timeline. And I know you don't, I'm sure you don't have the hosting agreement with you, but there's just, it talks about clauses in the agreement that refer to obtaining an anticipated approval of a license to operate the DGR in 2017. So that obviously would be changed.
So under the hosting agreement, if I reflect back, there was a couple of anticipated milestones when the hosting agreement was first struck a number of years ago. Back then, it was sort of a best guess. So in terms of a potential process, the engineering, I believe we had originally anticipated that we would receive a potential license around 2013. Hosting payments would be suspended a year following that period, of which we're sort of fast approaching that date now. Again, those were sort of best guesses at that point in time, and there was other clauses within the hosting agreement would be triggered by those potential milestones as they go down. So certainly that's sort of a key one for us, is to whether or not a license would be issued for the DGR. So in the meantime, based on the timeline, the hosting agreement payments have been suspended, pending the process as it goes along. Once those milestones is identified in the hosting agreement are triggered or reached, then aspects of the hosting agreement would be reinstalled.
Okay, so one of the clauses in the hosting agreement says that if the license approval of the DGR operation is not reached in 2017, for any other reason besides the failure of Kincardine or adjacent municipalities to exercise best efforts. Then at that point, both parties will address an amended agreement about whether the annual payments to Kincardine and the adjacent municipalities should continue to be required, or whether some reduced sum should be substituted. So I guess my question is, and there's a further clause talking about 2018 as being a DGR in-service date. So clearly we're probably not going to be reaching that goal or that milestone. Do you anticipate that you'll be approaching the municipalities with talks about this?
I think, again, we need to sort of allow the process to work it through. It's in the hands of the federal review and the federal government, and these are timelines that we don't really have any control of. Again, they were really best estimates at the time in foreseeing what EAs and projects of that time sort of look in terms of time. Clearly, this has been a project that's been more extensive and more work involved in assuring that all of the checks and balances and the right reviews are done. The hosting agreement, as you pointed out, provides on-ramps and off-ramps as milestones are reached or as milestones aren't reached. So as we reach those, those are discussions that can certainly be opened up or entered into with the signatories to the hosting agreement to reevaluate the hosting agreement. So I think it was a prudent agreement at the time that anticipated that best guesses were in place, but they also foresaw or anticipated potential roadblocks or on-ramps or off-ramps that may occur, and the agreement provides for those provisions of those future discussions to realign the hosting agreement.
Okay, I'll be fast. I also wanted to ask just about in the JRP hearings, I think in 2013, the JRP asked the CNSC to look at recycling as an option before an operating license would be granted. What are OPG's plans in terms of looking at that as an option?
Yeah, I think what the JRP reflected on was the public sentiment, a lot of good input that was provided, that they really wanted assurances that if the DGR was operational as waste is transferred from existing above ground storage, that when it is ready for permanent disposal, that all has been done with that waste. That OPG as a proponent has looked at opportunities to minimize the amount of volume of waste, to minimize the radionuclides, to ensure the package is as small as possible, to look at recycling efforts, to look at ways to minimize that waste. We've actually just embarked on further education awareness with our employees. We rely on our employees to take care and due diligence to carefully segregate that waste. The more we can do better at segregating the waste, then we can achieve better efficiencies through incineration and compaction and minimize the amount of what we call non-processable waste. There's really nothing we can do with it. Some of that could be cinder blocks and some cables that are and sort of dirt from construction. But when it comes to some of the materials, such as clothing and other items, there's a real opportunity to volume reduce by almost 95% through incineration and further 75% by compaction. We've also embarked on a couple of pilot projects. Some of our waste is what we call aged waste, so 3 decades when we started this. Our rigor around the segregation wasn't as refined as it is today, so we're going into some of our old bins. We've taken out 80 bins, for an example, and we set a pilot project where staff are actually opening up the bags and resegregating and recycling. We've successfully been able to remove 22,000 pounds of metal recently in the last 4 months, and that's been recycled back into the metal market. We're able to decontaminate the metals, and much of the metals were actually clean. So we're seeing some good efficiencies. We're able to take 80 bins and reduce that down to 14 bins. So I think that's an example of the kinds of programs we're undertaking and efforts to assure ourselves and the public and the regulator that what we have remaining truly is residual waste with no commodity, no value. There's nothing more that can be done. We've done the 3 R's, we've recycled, and I guess we're doing 4 R's if we're retrieving it and opening it up again and recycling it. So a strong effort and focus on that front is certainly being undertaken.
Okay. One last thing. If the agreement is amended or you open up the agreement again, would OPG consider, or have you talked about having adjacent municipalities as signatories to this agreement, unlike the first one?
I think it's premature to sort of make suggestions at that point, but certainly we recognize that Saugeen Shores and the adjacent municipalities are keenly interested in our operations, their geographic proximity. I think those are shared discussions that we'd want to have in an open and transparent way with all those parties involved.
Thank you.
Thank you. As someone who was out on the tour, thanks to Linda Kane and Jim McClay for showing us around in a just incredibly complete way. Jim McClay was a kid who, when he was little, just got fascinated with fossils and has done this amazing thing out there. What I wanted to say, and it may be premature to just coin you the expression you just used, he showed us the room with all of the core samples, and I realized that those core samples are the property of the province, but there's so many that they perhaps don't want them. And of course, if the DGR gets built, it will be within the nuclear power site, so it's not easily accessible. I would just like to encourage you to keep Saugeen Shores in mind should you ever get to a point where the province says that the core samples can stay in this region. We would welcome, I think, the opportunity to consider becoming a place that has an opportunity for people to see some of that geology and to learn a little bit more about a science, because the core samples are just so cool. So I'll just leave that with you, and if there ever needs to be a showcase place, I suspect we might be able to find some place here for them. Thank you.
It's a very kind offer and comment. What Diane's referring to is we have over 5,000 kilometers of rock core, the largest collection in Canada. And when you extract core within 2 years, you have to follow certain ministry guidelines, and they have to be given to the province for safe storage and future record keeping. Because of the volume of the core samples we have, we've struck a deal to manage that on their behalf, following all the regulatory requirements. But there will maybe come a time where and we get requests from around the world for those samples, and we carefully detail them, and we ship them off, and the world is studying them. I think it is kind of a very unique treasure, if you will, that we have, and a wonderful record of the history of this world and this area in particular that, as you point out, is a great suggestion that may be of interest to a broader public. So thank you for that.
If there's no further comments, then first of all, thanks very much for the update, Scott. We certainly appreciate the offer for the tour. I'm sure it's enlightening for all those people that haven't been there. I do know, though, some of our staff often say they'd be interested in that. So at some future date, perhaps if we can get some interest from our staff, we'll get a hold of you and we can have them go down.
We'd be delighted.
Thanks very much, Scott. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next deputation is Lisa Milne and Mark Kramer, and they're here to give us an update on West Ontario Power. Welcome, Mark and Lisa.
Technology has taken great strides forward, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, and fellow members of the public. It's a pleasure to be here, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the invite. We were particularly pleased to hear from you in light of the fact that there are fully 6 new members around this table that probably have not had a great deal of opportunity in their prior lives and their current lives to really become familiar with a fairly significant asset that the town of Saugeen Shores owns, has been involved with from its creation, and was actually inordinately instrumental in the creation of West Ontario Power back in the year 2000. So to you and the staff, thank you for being here. I'm pleased to also bring with me this evening our CEO, Lisa Milne. Lisa has been our CEO for the past 5 years with West Ontario, has a strong background, first of all, in financial entities. She is a CPA by trade, has worked in the financial services industry, and has done a terrific job for us for the past 5 years since assuming the mantle of CEO of West Ontario Power. She still, to this point in time, remains the only CEO of an LDC in the province of Ontario, and we're very proud of that fact. And it is with great pleasure that I introduce you to Lisa Milne. Lisa.
Thank you, Mark. And just to echo Mark's comments, thank you to the Mayor and Council and staff for having us here this evening. I believe you have a copy of the presentation, and I will go through it. And any questions or comments you have throughout, I'm happy to answer them for you. So just to start off, just to give you a brief history of West Ontario Power, back in 1998-1999, Bill 35 was introduced, which was the deregulation of our industry. So at that time, there was about 400 PUCs, HECs in the province, and at that time, Bill 35 introduced the removal of the PUCs and the HECs from the municipal level, and at that time, municipalities had the option to amalgamate or go on their own, similar to what Westerio Power did through an amalgamation of municipalities, or they had the option that they could sell to the Hydro One, which was the previous Ontario Hydro. So what ended up happening is once the market deregulated in 2000, we ended up with just shy of 100 LDCs in the province, and over time that number has come down, and we're somewhere in the low 70s right now. So November 1st of 2000, 8 municipalities and Fortis Ontario merged to become what is now Westerio Power. So initially it was Westerio Power Holdings, which owned 100% of 2 subsidiaries, which was Westerio Power Services, Inc. and Westerio Power, Inc., which actually was all of our poles and wires. So in January 1st of 2000, prior to that, it was determined that there wasn't really a need to have the 3 companies, so we amalgamated and merged the 2 subsidiaries, rolled them up into the holdings company, and we renamed the holdings company Power Inc., which is what we operate under today. There's a map of our service territory. So we do serve 15 communities in 8 separate municipalities. So your community of Saugeen Shores, which is Southampton, and Port Elgin, which is our furthest north community, and we are as far south as Palmerston. So we actually cover a very, very, very large service territory, almost 4,800 square kilometers. However, we are what we call the holes in the Swiss cheese because we are fully embedded and surrounded by Hydro One service territory. For those that are new to Council, what is unique about our industry is when the distribution licenses were determined back in 1999 and 2000, the service territory was determined at the time by the municipal boundaries at that time. So when you take a look at Port Elgin, Westerio Power only serves the municipal boundaries as they were established in 1999. So you can see we have this map redlined, and it's not necessarily the best map for you to take a look at, but to give you an idea, to the north, you kind of have to turn your head sideways a little bit, sorry about that. Kind of the Sandy Acres subdivision is the Northern Territory. To the east, we're just east of the landfill site and follow Mill Creek. And then the southernmost tip of Port Elgin is the township of Saugeen Shores and Port Elgin, that town line. In Southampton, again, if you can follow the red line, and it is a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle, again, we are Cameron Drive to the north, we follow the river, and the most southern part of our service territory is South Street. So you'll see there's a lot of jigs and jags there, especially on the eastern limits of your municipality. That is specifically served by Hydro One, which has served or caused us some issues as far as growth and the ability to grow and to grow organically when we are bound by the boundaries that were established in 1999. Here's a list of our shareholders. So these are in alphabetical order, not to show any preference to any one shareholder. However, you will see that Saugeen Shores is our largest shareholder at 24.98%. So there's a listing of our 8 municipal shareholders, and then Fortis Ontario, which is a private entity that has 9.99% ownership. This is a graph that shows our asset growth over time. So when Westerio Power was formed back in 2000, total assets on our books were $30.5 million. So over the last 14 years, we've seen those assets more than double. We've had growth of $31.7 million to have a net asset value of $62.24 million at the end of December 31st of 2014. So we've seen our assets grow on average by 5.36%. From an equity standpoint, or what our book value of the corporation is, again, we have seen significant growth over the last 14 years. The company, when it was formed, had equity value of approximately $13.5 million. You can see we've seen growth of $15.7 million over the 14 years, or 116% increase, which again, on average, of 5.76%. So what does this mean to you as a council and as a shareholder? Saugeen Shores, the equity value or the book value of your of your position with us is currently $7.3 million. That's to December 31st of 2014. Your initial value of your investment was $3.38 million. So you can see that your equity growth in West Ontario Power has more than doubled over the last 14 years, and again has grown at an average of 5.76%. So we're very proud of the value that we've brought to our shareholders, and the exceptional thing is we see a steady increase. On this slide, I've denoted the revenue stream that has been provided to Saugeen Shores since inception. So in the first 4 years, there was interest that was paid on a shareholder note that was taken back by the municipality when we amalgamated. That note is just a little over $3 million. And since that time, starting in 2004, the company also started paying an annual dividend. So your revenue stream that the corporation has paid to the municipality since to the end of 2014, is $3.87 million. We approximately provide the municipality between the annual interest and dividend payment approximately $300,000 per year. I wanted to take an opportunity to explain our bill to you. It is probably the most difficult thing to understand. Admittedly, our bills are not easy to understand. They're very confusing, and I'm hopeful that after I have an opportunity to walk you through this, that you'll have a better understanding when your bill comes in the mail and all the portions that make up your bill from West Ontario Power. So we have taken an average consumer within your community that would consume approximately 1,000 kilowatt hours per month. So their total bill is $202.51. So I want to start taking away pieces of the pie, and I think this will help you understand, once we walk through the collection policy, some of the reasons and underlying decisions we need to make for our disconnection policy. So I take away the HST portion, which is $23.30. The next largest portion of the bill is the commodity portion, which is $118.51. That particular piece of the pie is what's paid to the generators, which Scott has left. He gave me a little dig, so I was going to dig him back, but I won't. Yeah, he left very quickly. I'll catch up with him later. So the $118.51, we actually pay that to a provincial agency, which is the Independent Electricity System Operator, or what we call the IESO. So these are the generators of all the electricity in our province, which includes nuclear as well as wind, solar, biomass, all the power generated. The next line item is our debt retirement charge, which I know is everyone's least favorite part of the bill. On this particular customer bill, that amounts to approximately $7. That is the amount that is paid to the provincial government to pay off the debt of the predecessor Ontario Hydro. We next then pay out $19.25 to what we call retail charges. These are the charges that go for the transmission system, or what for Hydro One networks. So again, $19.25. So you can see our piece of the pie is getting smaller and smaller. $4.38, that goes to the administrative costs to regulate our industry. Oops, didn't want to go too fast and go past this one. $1.87 of every bill is for your smart meter. Again, another provincial program that we recoup through our monthly bills every month. So what does that mean? $28.20 is what West Ontario Power has left of the bill, which approximately is 15% of the bill. So even before we've had an opportunity to either bill our customers and, more importantly, collect from our customers, we have paid out almost $180 to third-party agencies. So while we are responsible for paying out 100%, we're responsible for collecting 100% of the bill. We also have to pay out 85% of it to third parties, and that money is 100% guaranteed to them. So if a customer defaults on a bill, we're unable to get our money back from the IESO. We're unable to get our money back from Hydro One. So all those costs are flow-through costs, and utilities, not unlike Westario Power, but all utilities in the province, are basically bankrolling the distribution system. So at the end of the day of your $202 bill, Westario Power has $28.20. So what does that mean from a collection process? So we take our collection policy very seriously, given the fact of what we are financially responsible for, and we can get into some of the numbers later. Customers are typically billed within your community on the 10th of the month for the previous month's consumption. Typically, the invoice is due 17 days after the bill date, and if the bill is outstanding for 5 days after the due date, a reminder notice is mailed to the customer. And again, that's a courtesy reminder. We're not obligated to mail those reminders out. If after 12 days the bill still remains outstanding, then Westario Power will issue a notice of disconnection. So what does the notice of disconnection say? Well, customers have 10 days from when the notice of disconnection has been issued to contact our office and make suitable payment arrangements. If a customer is designated as low income, then they have an additional 21 days to contact our office to make suitable payment arrangements. What do we consider to be suitable payment arrangements? Well, any eligible payment arrangement may include full payment, payment plans that are made within a specified disconnection period. Customer calls and says, I'm getting paid next Friday. I can pay X amount of dollars. We accept those types of arrangements. Or there's also formal prescribed arrears management programs that we also offer. If suitable payment arrangements are not made with the customer, once the 10 days or the 21 days has expired, we are obligated to contact our customer at least 48 hours before their service will be disconnected. And again, another attempt to contact our customer, try and make suitable payment arrangements in order to avoid disconnection of service. During this time period, from the time of issuance of their notice of disconnection, our staff remain in constant contact, while it's either in the field or at our office, trying to make suitable payment arrangements with the customer in order to avoid disconnection. And I want to make it very clear that we are in the service of providing, or we're in the business of providing a service, which is the distribution of electricity. Disconnection of power is an absolute last resort and is only exercised when all other options have been exhausted. I wanted to provide you with some statistics for your particular municipality and what it means as far as our collection policy. So I've actually broken it out between your two communities, Port Elgin and Southampton. So we service approximately 3,500 customers in Port Elgin. You'll see in the first column I've identified January, February, March, the number of disconnection notices that have been issued. So these notices have been issued at least 12 days after a customer is past due on their account. So this represents, in your community, about 5% of your customers on a monthly basis have received these notices. Excuse me. You will see in the next column that of all those individuals, or sometimes businesses as well, that have received disconnection notices, the number of arrangements we've been able to make. So in the month of January, we were able to make arrangements for 186 customers. In February, all of our customers, so there was no disconnections in the month of February at all. And in the month of March, we were able to make suitable arrangements for 147 customers. So you can see by the statistics to the right, and as Mark had indicated earlier, I'm an accountant, so I love my numbers. And I had to go a few decimal places because I really wanted this to be statistically correct. 99.99885% of our customers were provided service within your community. we did have to disconnect some customers, and I'll talk in vague comments in here in a moment. And I think when we look at Southampton, we can see the numbers are actually much better. We only disconnected one customer in January and one in February. So I just want to talk briefly about the disconnections that did take place. In Southampton, the two customers that were disconnected are actually both vacant properties. And one, in fact, actually remains off to this day. So these are either landlord-tenant situations or potentially seasonal properties. In Port Elgin, in the month of January, we had 4 disconnections. One was a vacant property, 2 were tenants that left the property, and the 4th individual had their power disconnected but was able to make suitable payment arrangements and had their power restored the same day. There were no disconnections in February, and then in March in Port Elgin, we did have 3 disconnections. Again, one was a vacant property. The 2 others did have individuals that were living there that are tenants. One of the 2 had been disconnected previously, about 6 months prior. So this is an individual that certainly has struggled in the past, but we were running into the same issues again. So I think when you take a look at the number of customers within your community, the number of notices that we're issuing, the significant number of arrangements that we are making, I think that we've been very fair in our policy. I think we've been very reasonable, and I believe that we've been able to really make suitable arrangements with a fair number of our customers. Excuse me, sorry. I normally don't get to talk this much. Yeah. Yeah. So I think what's really important to outline here is what West Area Power does offer its customers. And probably the single most program that is best to offer to our customers is our equal payment plan, or what we consider to be budget billing. This will take away some of the peaks and valleys a lot of customers realize, especially if they do have electric heat. What budget billing does is it takes an estimation of your 12 months bills and divide it and spread it equally over a 12-month period. So for someone that is on fixed income, low income, and actually anyone, we can argue that a lot of us are on fixed income because we get the same paycheck every week or every 2 weeks. This is an excellent plan that is available to all of our customers that allows them to budget their hydro consumption monthly. We also have a free program which is called My Hydro Eye. It's available to all of our residential customers. It's a web-based application. You can log in. The information is on your invoice. It allows you to monitor your monthly usage. It is as current as yesterday, so it gets loaded on a daily basis. It allows you the opportunity that you can predict your monthly invoices, and it will also establish alarms that the customer can establish. So if they want notifications, if they're over a dollar threshold or a consumption threshold, they'll actually receive an email notification. So it allows customers to better manage their consumption. We also have a full-time energy conservation officer on site. So any customer who calls in that wants to know about programs that are available, we've dealt with a lot of the counties for low-income programs that are available, so that was a significant program. This individual has made house visits, he's met with landlords. So again, all kinds of programs available that we're trying to help customers manage their energy usage. If I can give any parting words, if you're dealing with any of your constituents or your ratepayers that are concerned, the biggest advice I can tell them is to contact our office immediately. What happens quite often is people leave things too late, they receive their notification, and then they're calling at the last minute. So everyone is in a panic, and it's very difficult to manage that situation. So contact our office anytime if you're having problems paying your invoice. There's also social agencies that can assist. There's a provincial helpline, which is 211, and then we also have our local United Way, which is United Way of Bruce Grey. Your own municipality, you may consider a vital services bylaw, which is defined under the Residential Tenancy Act. That is a big undertaking by the municipality because what it in effect does is the municipality guarantees payment to the utility in order that vital services are provided. And then you would recoup your money either directly from the landowner or through your tax roll. And I want to make it very clear that West Ontario Power has been a partner with our social agencies. We've donated approximately $150,000 to the United Way of Bruce Grey over the last 10 years. We are mandated to give a portion of our distribution revenue to the United Way. Our amount in 2015 was $12,000. So there is an incremental $4,500 that was provided to the United Way, and that was raised through employee contributions, board contributions, and additional corporate contributions. So we as a board, as a management team, and as a team at West Ontario Power do believe in giving back to our community, helping our community, and we've done so in giving the additional funds to the United Way. Just quickly before I finish here, I just wanted to talk about some of the ongoing initiatives within your community. Here we go. So you often see our trucks rolling in your service in your community here. More so in the summer, we do have some capital programs again scheduled for 2015. So in the last 3 years, we have invested approximately $2.7 million in the capital infrastructure within your community. Our largest capital program was the number 6 copper replacement. So this is a bare copper wire that poses a safety and a reliability issue. So that has been replaced. That was completed in 2013. We do have multi-year projects. Capital poles, we have approximately 12,000 in our service territory and of all varying ages and conditions. So throughout the year that will be on here. If I came back here 30 years from now, I would still have that on your slide. And then what we're also doing in your community is the pole tran replacement. And what a pole tran is it's actually a transformer and a pole that is all in one. So they are an old technology. You can't replace them anymore. The parts aren't available anymore. So what we basically have done is we've replaced these pole trans with a pad mount transformer that sits within your roadway, your access, and so we have replaced them. So what has happened is most of those have been steel poles, and they have had some street lighting on them. So I know that we've worked closely with your municipality in also talking about having the poles replaced so that you can reinstall your street light infrastructure. So again, you're going to see those projects take place in your community in 2015. I just wanted to hit briefly on some potential growth opportunities. We've met here a number of times, and it is in our business plan that we as a utility do want to grow. We currently sit at approximately 23,500 customers. We are considered to be a medium-sized utility within the province. We are bound by the old municipal boundaries, so if there's an opportunity that we can grow through acquiring or merging with another utility, we will certainly take a look at that opportunity. As you're well aware, the provincial budget was announced last week, and probably the biggest item in that from a shareholder perspective is that the provincial budget did announce that there would be time-limited tax relief starting on January 1st, 2016 for a 24-month period. So what that actually means is that they are offering an exemption for LDCs under 30,000 customers, which of course West Ontario Power would be exempt from a transfer tax, and also exempting any capital gains arising from a deemed disposition. So again, at a very high level, what this really means is that we are currently a non-taxable entity because we are 90% municipally owned. If we were to be purchased or merged with a taxable entity, then that would trigger the transfer tax, which is currently at 33%, and there would also be what is basically a capital gains tax. What we're seeing is the government is providing relief. Minister Chiarelli has made it very clear that he does believe there are too many utilities in the province, and they're hopeful that by providing some limited tax relief that we could see some activity in the province as far as any potential mergers or sales of utilities. So what does that mean for Westario? Well, we will certainly consider any opportunity, but it has to be based on the business case. We have to stay true to our core principles, which are the economies of scale, the ability to reduce our costs, an increase in our customer service, our value, and our satisfaction. We want to see improved shareholder or financial performance for our shareholders so that we can provide additional value, and that we would still be able to maintain funding for our system upgrades and improve reliability. The last point I wanted to bring forward to Council that your staff is very familiar with is the Utilities Communication Forum. This was developed a fair number of years ago, and Westario Power was a founding member of this forum. And it includes representatives of the counties, municipalities, utilities, and our internet and cable service providers located within the 4 counties that we serve. The purpose of this forum is it provides an opportunity to discuss joint projects and changes within our business that may have an impact on other stakeholders within the group. So probably the biggest benefit is I know it's very beneficial for each of the groups involved to bring forward things like their capital plans, their capital budgets. If we are doing a project in your community and we know and your staff know that you have something slated a couple years from now, we'll have discussions to see can you speed yours up or can we slow ours down in order that we can work together and have potential synergies. It gives us an opportunity to promote cost sharing, capital synergies and capital projects, and it also promotes consistency and increased communication between all parties in the public. That is all I have for my formal presentation, so I would welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mayor Smith, and thank you, Lisa and Mark, and for your presentation, and thank you so much to your board of directors and staff for providing the service that you provide to our residents.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. I just had a comment and then a few questions if I might. And I guess my first comment, you take a look at Saugeen Shores Equity as a 25% shareholder, and going from 3.92 million to 7.3 million, 115.9% increase, 14 years. Project that out into 2030, we have a $15 million utility share in Westario Power, which is a pretty respectable number if we could attain that, correct? Questions I have, well documented the province of Ontario with the pending sell-off with Hydro One, 15% per year for the next 4 years, 60%. I guess my question is, what kind of an impact could that have on our local distribution companies, i.e. Westario Power? And secondly, currently I read there's approximately 77 distribution companies. What do you see that number, if you could, I know it would be maybe a guesstimate, what do you see that number looking like over the next 5 years? My final question would be, in terms of our 25% share with Westario Power, if you can crystal ball that over the next 5 years, what you see perhaps our numbers maybe looking like 5 years from now.
Yes. To answer your first question, so the impact of Hydro One, the sale of Hydro One, to be clear, this is a sale of Hydro One shares, not Hydro One assets. And I think what our industry was really looking for was the province to release some of its assets. So obviously they're needing to raise money for their infrastructure and those types of things. So the 15%, yes, they are going to sell up to 60% over the next 4 years. I think the bigger thing to watch for our industry is what's going to happen with Hydro One Brampton. Hydro One Brampton, if we take a look and go back to 1999, Hydro One Brampton never was part of Hydro One. It's always remained a completely separate entity. And part of the budget also had announced that there's a potential sale or merger of Hydro One Brampton to 3 large utilities in the GTA area, so PowerStream, Horizon, and EnerSource. So PowerStream is the Vaughan-Barrie corridor, EnerSource is Mississauga, and then Horizon is the Hamilton area. So that is the first time in a fair number of years that Hydro One, or the province, has been willing to give up distribution assets. So to go back to your original question, I think that there's an opportunity for Westerio Power and other utilities in the province to have open discussions with the province about the potential to grow our businesses by acquiring Hydro One assets. What does that mean as far as the number of utilities? I believe that was your second question. I don't know what the right number is. Our industry has done all kinds of presentations to the Ed Clark panel, the distribution sector panel, which was before that, and the Drummond report, which was even before that. Utilities our size are very efficient. Our costs are half of that of what Hydro One is, and you often see that in your communities where you can have neighbors that are across the street from one another, and the Hydro One distribution charges are double that of of Westerio Power. That's on the websites. I mean, it's on the Ontario Energy Board. That is a fact. That's very open information. So we are very efficient. We are very cost effective, which means that bigger isn't always better. So what is the right number? I don't know. Everyone has their opinion of that, but I think there is a place for the Westerios in the world, and certainly in our province. Where does that leave us 5 years from now? That's a big question. We talk about that at the board level. I think now that we have seen what I would consider to be some fairly aggressive announcements in the budget in relation to our industry, I think there's a real opportunity for management and the board to strategize where we need to be, not only today, but in 5 years from now, and in order to be sustainable in the future while still providing shareholder value. So I think you're going to see some changes in the industry. I hope we're at the forefront of it. I know that's certainly a goal of our board and of the management team, and certainly we would keep our shareholders posted along the process. Sure.
Mike, I'd like to speak to your question around the 24.98% ownership, and where will that be in 5 years from now? That's really dependent, Mike, on a whole lot of differing influences. If there are no acquisitions that require a dilution for the current shareholders, then that percentage will stay consistent, and the difference being the value, of course, will grow through an enhancement in the equity position. Okay. It's not inconceivable that you might get into an amalgamation of multiple LDCs under the opportunity that's here right now, wherein you would then create, for all intents and purposes, a new Westerio Power that required no cash outlay by the existing shareholders, but a simple dilution of the percentage of ownership to reflect the new pie. So if you go from 25% of 62 million and you don't put any additional funds in the pot, you might reduce to 18% of a $100 million entity, if you see what I mean, Mike. So your participation is still there. It's just reflective of how we arrived at 24.98% in the first place. The 8 utilities and PUCs and HECs came together, and it was deemed that the assets that we brought to the equation in the year 2000 were equal to 24.98% of the total value of the amalgamation of all of the assets that came together. So that same formula can certainly be used going forward. There is another option out there also. And with the waiver of the transfer tax, which has been a bugaboo for us right from the year 2000, in that 2 things happened. They made it illegal under the Municipal Act for you to inject any further capital into your own company, which, if you think about that as a business person, is a very large oxymoron. It handcuffs you is what it does, because your very owners can't allow you to grow by injecting capital. So we were stuck with the capital pool we had. The structure of ownership that Saugeen Shores has is deliberate and has been this way since day one, and it consists of 50% equity at the time and 50% shareholder loan. And it's what we referred to up there as your interest stream flows from the shareholder loan we created right out of the gate, wherein we created roughly 3 million equity, 3 million shareholder loan, and it's the loan that pays you 4.12% right now. The reason that sum of money is so important to Saugeen Shores to have it remain as a shareholder loan is that it provides the opportunity, the vehicle, and the instrument that would have allowed us to purchase, tax exempt because we're a municipality, from any of the smaller shareholders within West Ontario Power if they decided that part of their strategy was to exit the LDC altogether, and it would then have given us the pot of money whereby through the shareholder agreement we would have the right, and first privilege mind you, to actually buy their share of ownership of West Ontario Power. That pot of money became inordinately important to the go-forward value to Saugeen Shores of their continued ownership of West Ontario Power. Not all shareholders did that. In fact, half of them withdrew all of their shareholder loans literally within the first 24 to 36 months of the creation of West Ontario Power, which put them at a significant disadvantage because now, if an opportunity did come forward to acquire smaller percentages or percentages of smaller shareholders, they had no ability to participate in that, even though they had full right and privilege under the shareholder agreement, because they had no way to generate cash to do it. The municipality could not provide them with money to purchase the additional ownership. They did not have any cash invested in terms of a shareholder loan, so they were effectively frozen for all time at the level of ownership that they had, Mike. So, in a nutshell, the Ed Clark report is a huge opportunity. What the landscape's going to look like is unknown at this time, but suffice to say, we see it as a very large opportunity to create a more valuable asset for you down the road. But don't forget, the devil is always in the detail. And right now, as you've heard, there may actually be an appeal, Mr. Mayor, on whether the proceeds of the sale of shares of Hydro One can actually be used for debt reduction, which is what they've identified in the legislation. So the plot thickens, shall we say.
Thanks, Mark. I think Councillor Minaj has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too would like to thank you for the excellent presentation, education, and information. I have 3 quick questions. They can be quick. If you want to just say you'll get back to us later, that's fine. But my first question is, what prevents us from encompassing people across the street that are the old boundary lines then? So one neighbor, I mean, I live next door to the transformer for West Ontario Power, so I'm even closer to you than you think. But so I wonder if neighbors across the street that are getting their service inside the urban envelope, why can't we grow into across the street? So that would be my first question. What's preventing us from doing that? How would we make that happen? Multiple questions in one. The second one would be, and Mark's familiar with this, is an inventory of high-risk components due to age or failure due to weather. So the transformer that sits next to me, if a lightning bolt struck it and destroyed the transformer, is there a list, an inventory list that says we're well aware of all of the, I'm sure you have it, will you share it with us so that we're familiar with it as well, especially in light of emergency management issues that may come to light as I sit on that committee as well? And my last question is, so if I was able to get the support of my council peers, and I certainly, as a representative on the BIA, have looked at, and I've discussed this with Mark on the side too, is that this is the future. We're in 2015, and yet we still look at transformer poles that in downtown areas that look like they were erected in 1920, and the component parts they're literally becoming an eyesore to the beautification processes. So what processes should I follow? Can I request to either partner with or find a way to make enhancements in those areas so that these questions don't have to be answered tonight? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
They're quick answers, actually. What prevents us at our boundaries is our distribution license. Because we are a monopoly, our distribution license is actually defined, or the territory is defined within our license. So if there is a customer that falls outside of our distribution license as it currently stands today, in order to access that customer and provide service to that customer, we actually have to go through a formal rate application process collectively with Hydro One to the Ontario Energy Board. The process is quite long and it's very expensive, and they get delayed to the point where customers normally give up. So that's the problem. We are a monopoly, so our territory is defined. In regards to the inventory of what we consider to be high-risk components, we do have an asset management plan. We do have lists of all of our major components, substations, high-voltage transformers. That information, PCBs, we're obligated to provide that information back to the municipality. So if there's an opportunity that we can share that with the municipality from either emergency preparedness, I believe that we sit on a lot of those committees as well. We're happy to do so. That information is available quite easily. We track that all the time. Yeah. So what Mark just spoke about, we actually have 27 substations to serve 23,000 customers, which is unheard of. The town of Port Elgin alone has 6 substations to service 3,500 customers. We have so many voltages within our service territory. What we've actually put in place and have sitting at the other side of our service territory is a mobile transformer station. So should there be an incident, transformers and substations are quite expensive. They're difficult to transport. So we actually have a mobile station that has various voltages on it. So if we were to lose a station, we would actually be able to bring it back fairly quickly with some of the new equipment that we've just put into place. The last item that you brought up, which is your downtown beautification, overhead lines, they're ugly. I agree. I'm not going to lie. Underground plant is very expensive to install, and it's hard to believe actually its life expectancy is much lower than that of an overhead line. The cost is almost double to install it, and it has probably 3/4 the lifespan. So if there's an opportunity, if you're looking at beautification projects, quite often we sit down with our staff, your staff, and we can work through those and see if there's ability for cost sharing or if it's 100% customer pay, but those are done on a job-by-job basis. Okay.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, guys. Just a couple of things. First, with regard to the disconnection policy, first, I want to say thanks to both of you guys, because over the last couple of years, I've asked you a few times just to give me updates from West Ontario Power on your disconnection policy, and you guys are always really quick to get back with detailed information, and I really appreciate that. And what your information always demonstrates, as you demonstrated again tonight, is that West Ontario undertakes a great deal of effort to keep those disconnection numbers extremely low. And I mean, the number that you gave us tonight was, there was 9 disconnects, but in effect only about 2 maybe that involved people in the town of Saugeen Shores. And those numbers, I think, based on the media reports I've heard over the last little while, because you've been out doing this show to a few different places, it's pretty similar across your region. My problem is that, and I said this to Francesca Dobbin when she was here a couple of weeks ago too, and I really believe it, is that even one disconnect of a person or family in the cold of the winter, and I know you guys would agree with me here, is something that's hard to accept, right? And I guess what I just like to ask is, because we have a resolution from Brockton coming up later on the agenda with regard to this issue as well. Is there an opportunity for you guys to work with your shareholders, with United Way, with other interested parties to explore changes to your policy or other options? I know there are some other options out there that I've heard about from other LDCs. I'm not sure even if you guys employ them. I didn't hear you mention them, but the suggestion of devices which limit the amount of electricity a property gets to provide just enough electricity to run a furnace and a fridge, or alternates, what's the word I'm looking for, disconnects electricity intermittently to allow the place to stay warm and everybody to stay alive, and also get some control from your perspective, because I appreciate that, unpaid bills is something that has to be dealt with. Just a question of timing in the year and whether it ought to be dealt with through disconnection in the months of January, February, or March, when in a year like this year it can be minus 20 degrees out. So I just want to know, is there some openness from Westero's board, Mark, or Westero's administration, Lisa, to engage in this a little further and have some more dialogue with the stakeholders on this front?
To answer your question, I think we do a lot more than perhaps, I'm going to pat ourselves on the back here a little bit, we do an awful lot to assist our customers, and I think the numbers reflect that. I had stated earlier that, and I agree with you 100%, Luke, we're not in the business of cutting off people. So we have worked very closely with our partners at the United Way and at the counties. I think we have an opportunity that we can work more closely with our counties because they seem to be our largest stakeholder in this, and because we deal with 4 counties. The difficulty we have is each county has a different policy. So that makes it even difficult for us to manage. So I think that we have an opportunity to start the dialogue with them to see if there's better ways that we can work together. And I think that we've also been very careful in the winter months. We're very cognizant of that. I've spoken to Kincardine, which is 100% heat. We didn't disconnect any of their customers in the month of February. So I think that goes to show that we do work very hard with our customers. We do try and make arrangements. But conversely, customers need to work with us as well. And there's all kinds of programs. I could have done that today. I know that when the United Way was here, they actually listed a lot of the programs that we do have available. So I think there's certainly opportunity.
Luke, I don't disagree that our motivation is certainly not to disconnect. And as you've seen, it is absolutely the last recourse, Luke. And we do take that very seriously. We believe that there are methods out there that it could be avoided if everyone, for example, in that situation took advantage of our equal monthly billing. It surprises us that there are those that fall within those numbers, Luke, that refuse to go on an equal payment plan, which, as you know, would absolutely smooth it out between summer and winter. The surprises would be gone over the coldest periods of time. But you cannot force anyone to do those types of things, Luke. Can we adopt an absolute blanket policy of not disconnecting anyone? I think that would be based strictly, Luke, on the participation of our partners, more specifically our shareholders. And certainly, at our last board meeting a week ago, we have reached out to the County of Bruce to try to be creative with us and their partner counties. As you see, we service 4 counties, and that's also a very challenging issue from a structural standpoint of view, Luke. We believe that Bruce County is the logical lead in that the bulk of our customers reside in Bruce County or near Bruce County wannabes, being Hanover. So we believe that they have the mechanism in the structure. There is Bruce County Social Services. There is Bruce County Social Housing. And we believe that through dialogue with them, that we would like to see if there can be a partnership created between Wellington, Grey, and Bruce for sure. And if we could reach out to Huron, that would be excellent. But North Huron is our only shareholder and is a very small percentage of Huron County. But we would still welcome them to that discussion, Luke. So the answer isn't yes, but the answer isn't no. And I guess it really is fully dependent on the level of participation by our partners, and by extension, they are indeed our shareholders.
Excellent. And Mr. Mayor, if I could just very, very quickly, I appreciate that, and I think that what I heard there is that working with the shareholders is something that's on the table, so I appreciate that, and hopefully we can do that. The other question that I had was a question with regard to the comment about the number of distribution companies out there, and the report that came out in 2012, the panel, the Renewing Ontario's Electricity Distribution Sector report identified their thought that there should be about 8 to 12 larger distribution companies in the province. And I just wanted to really drill down on your comment there that you made about the potential for Westario to acquire pieces of Hydro One as a result of what the province is working on now. Is it your view that Westario could become one of those 8 to 12 larger distribution companies identified to the province in that report? Is that the direction we're heading?
Until given a reason to the contrary, that is certainly our goal. Whether 8 to 12 is the magic number, no one seems to know that. I mean, that came out in the Blue Ribbon Report that was chaired by Marie Elston with Floyd Loughran and the lawyer. Can't remember his name. Doesn't matter. But that Blue Ribbon panel originally was the one that came out and started to dangle that number out there. And I think what the Ed Clark report has done is reaffirmed the thought process that says they believe it's preferential to come down to a smaller number as opposed to a specific number. And it's not all that different than what we went through with municipal amalgamation, where they really wanted us to get much smaller as municipalities, but this is what they wound up with. So, Luke, our goal, unless the financials indicate that it is not to the best interest of the shareholders and our customers to remain as one of the 12, our goal would be to be in that forum.
I think we have a couple more questions. I'm going to ask everyone to be very brief because we're running out of time here quickly.
I was going to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for not cutting us off at 10 minutes because it's a nice opportunity to speak. I wanted to pick up on two things that were said. One of the bigger issue than getting cut off is that time of use, conservation, pricing policies don't take into account that people live in areas where electric heat is the way that they heat. Thank goodness we have options here with natural gas and propane. There are some communities that are a lot worse off than we are. What I wanted to pick up on, though, was the aesthetic opportunity that you have to contribute to our community. The joint committee that exists, that the utilities and the municipality, you all talk. We had a whatever that word is. We had a lot a couple years ago of the boxes go in on the ground, and it just seemed that for a period of years, utilities were digging up the same street every year, and there's all these little boxes out there. Whatever we can do to get that all together and make it look more attractive, that's a good thing. So keep up that conversation. I did want to, though, mention also, like Councillor Minaj said, we have some ugly wires in places. Some of them are redundant. Some of them are not active anymore. And I guess, for example, in downtown Southampton, there's 2 wires that go across the street, and I don't think that they're active anymore. It would be nice if there could be a program that removes the inactive or redundant wires from view. And going along with that, I know you have a replacement pole policy, and you need to do some work sometimes. I get comments every now and again about the restoration of land around the base of a pole. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. So just wherever you have an opportunity to help us keep the community looking good, we really appreciate when you take advantage of that. And so I'll just ask you if there's any way the inactive wires that are hanging in places that they don't need to be there, it'd be really nice if at least they could be removed. Thank you.
I think we have one more question. Councillor Dave Mayette, did you have a question? Again, can we kind of be brief? We've been in over an hour here with this deputation, well over an hour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I was going to actually just withdraw my request, but while I got the mic, I'll just make the point, and picking up on Deputy Mayor Charbonneau's points. We understand that Westario is a business, and the business needs to collect money in order to be. It's just important to, I think, point out that we're just talking about the people that qualify for the low-income policy. There's no municipality or no shareholder, certainly, especially the major shareholder, that is going to give Westario a problem with disconnecting vacant landlord or vacant tenants or vacant properties or businesses that have gone away and things like that. Disconnection is non-disconnection during the winter months is nobody's goal, because obviously there are just people that walk away or people whose cottages or whatever the situation is. It's really important to focus on the fact that there are people who are low income, and quite often some of the reasons that they are in a low income situation is they could have other complications in their lives, health or otherwise, and that it's important to focus on those, and that we believe, and we learned that from the United Way, and Lisa, you know my position with United Way. I work with them a little bit, volunteer purposes, to focus on the fact that there needs to be some leeway and dialogue when it comes to those very, very few people who are in precarious situations due to their income levels and perhaps their health issues. Because, like Deputy Mayor Charbonneau said, even one person who gets put in a dangerous, life-threatening situation is too many. And you will agree with that, I'm sure. Just wanted to point that out.
One closing comment, if I could, Mr. Mayor, and I will be very brief. Dave, in your position, and we know what you do with United Way, you could really help us by encouraging your people and your clients to really, really start participating in the monthly budget program. That would really help. It would really alleviate a lot of the problems for a lot of the people that are on the fixed incomes. Whatever you can do to help us with that, we would really appreciate it.
I absolutely agree with you, and I will tell you one of the major programs that the United Way runs is financial literacy, because there are many, many people who, not just for the sake of their hydro bills or Wisterio bills, are in precarious situations, just handling financial situations. So we actually work on a Trillium grant that teaches people in precarious situations how to manage their income, and that is a component of it. But I will feed that back, that the monthly billing, I'm on monthly billing myself because I'm sometimes not that good at it myself. So, understood.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just a follow-up from what Councillor Mayette was asking. In the case of a disconnection with the two people in Saugeen Shores, for instance, who are still living there, would you do an evaluation to see if there are vulnerable people living in that home and possibly have an exemption policy in place if there were children, elderly, people who needed oxygen?
There are rules specific to those that have medical devices. So there are longer disconnection wait periods if the information is provided to our offices by their medical practitioner. And when we talked earlier about the 10-day window and 21-day window, that extends to 60 days. So again, if the customer provides us that information, then we do work with or add that and make that part of our policy. In regards to making an assessment of individual circumstances, it's very difficult for us to do that at our administrative level. That's why we do work very closely with the social agencies. They qualify the specific customers, what their needs are, and then we work through them rather than directly with the customer. So those types of things are certainly taken into account, but it's not our staff that specifically do it. That's done either through at the county level or at the United Way level.
Okay, and one last question. I noticed that in the Ontario Energy Board rules for low-income consumers, it was talking about the arrears payment agreement, and that certain eligible low-income customers are allowed more time. For instance, 8 months if you owe an amount less than twice your average monthly bill, going up to 16 months. This would be for people who haven't had this kind of payment plan for at least 12 months. Is that something that you would be evaluating as well? Because you didn't mention it in your policy for disconnect.
We do offer it, and the reason I did mention it because the United Way actually had listed all those programs in their presentation that was here at Council a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't want it to be redundant. Yes, Wisterio does offer those programs, which is why when you see the payment arrangements, we are, in most circumstances, able to come to suitable payment arrangements, which may include those types of arrangements you're talking about, anywhere from 5 months right up to 16 months, to assist with their arrears repayment. So that is certainly offered by Wisterio Power.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark and Lisa, very much for that very detailed information. One of the things I will tell you, and I hear it at the county, and I know the county is interested in all kinds of things, Mark, but in the last 2 years, almost on a weekly basis, I would get a call from people on their bills. And the issue, what I want to point out, and I want to be really fair, because you're passing on a problem that's created at a different level of government and forced to administer it, and that is the issue. And we're seeing rates again increase again the 1st of May, and promises of more increases, and I appreciate all the work you've done and everything you've brought here tonight, but I think the issue is a bigger issue, and it rests at a different forum. And anything any of us can do to raise that with the minister, I think, is worthwhile. So thanks very much for the evening, and
my apologies for destroying your agenda.
I just saw the 15 minutes for 2 speakers. My presentation had that covered, so my apologies as well. Thank you.
Okay, so the next deputation is Bruce Martin. He's from the Southampton BIA with the budget presentation. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, town councillors, and staff. I have the pleased to bring the Southampton BIA budget to council. Our revenue for 2015 as the BIA levy calculated by the town is $29,350, which is our total revenue. And then under expenditures, we have some line items: marketing, brochures, print material for $5,000, promotion, special events such as Marine Heritage Festival, July 1st celebrations, $5,000, communications, social media, $1,300, for a subtotal of $11,300. Next category, beautification. We have our hanging flower baskets for $3,600. Street benches, $3,000. Bicycle racks, $3,000. Light pole banners, $2,000. Subtotal there for $11,600. Administration costs, strategic planning, $3,200. Office equipment and supplies, $2,000. Office rent, so we're very happy to receive space in the town hall in Southampton for a reasonable fee of $70. We appreciate that. And our OBIAA membership of $250. Miscellaneous of $930 for a total of $64.50, giving us total expenditures of $29,350. That is the budget as approved by the BIA membership at our general membership meeting last week. Any comments or questions?
Thanks very much, Bruce. Anybody got a comment or question for Bruce? Councillor Grace.
I'd just like to thank you for the report and thank you for all the hard work that the BIA is doing in Southampton and Port Elgin. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Bruce. Again, good luck with your budget and your first budget, as a matter of fact. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. The next item on the agenda is a staff report that has to do with the business license for the Port Elgin Flea Market. Sorry, Farmers Market. And our clerk, Linda White, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the previous Committee of Whole meeting, the Port Elgin BIA requested that the town waive the business licensing fee for the individual vendors participating at the farmers market. The BIA has implemented an application process whereby interested vendors apply for a space at the farmers market, and only if the vendor meets the following criteria: only approved products that are made, baked, grown, raised, caught, or harvested by the approved vendor may be sold at the market. Is the vendor approved by the BIA? The BIA collects approximately $2,000 in revenue from the vendors. The revenue is used to help offset the BIA's expenditures for improvement, beautification, and maintenance of the municipally owned land, buildings, or structures, and for the promotion of the business improvement area. The BIA is not allowed by legislation to spend money for any other purpose. Section 2.4 of the town's business licensing bylaw does not require the individual vendors to obtain a business license if the vendors are selling goods at a flea market, craft show, or antique show or place. And the definition from the wording of the bylaw is provided there. In past years, staff has interpreted this section to include farmers market. Similar to the flea market and Pumpkin Fest, the organizers of the farmers market administer the vendor's application, collection of fees, placement of the vendors, and ensures compliance with the overall terms and conditions of the event. As the organizers of these events have assumed the administration of the vendor permit process, the town has not been involved with the administration and as such does not collect a license fee from the individual vendors. It is recommended that the farmers market be deemed a place in accordance with Section 2.4 of the Business Licensing Bylaw, which exempts individual vendors from obtaining a business license. This interpretation is consistent with how the bylaw is applied to the flea market, Pumpkin Fest, Rotary Home Show, Antique Show, and Annual Craft Show. With respect to the comparison between the flea market and the farmers market, the flea market is operated by the Port Elgin Tourist Association, which is a group of business owners from the accommodation sector. The association has negotiated an agreement with the municipality for the use of the space. The agreement with the Port Elgin Tourist Association was originally formed by the former town of Port Elgin and most recently renewed in March 2015 for a 3-year term, with no changes to the agreement being requested. The long-standing agreement with the Tourist Association includes a provision for the association to contribute $5,000 towards beach improvements and an annual business licensing in the amount of $1,650 for up to 25 out-of-town vendors. A similar agreement has not been negotiated with the Port Elgin Business Improvement Association for the use of the Coulter Parkette. Preliminary discussions between the town and the BIA regarding the lease of the Coulter Parkette have taken place, but a formal agreement has not been drafted. The Port Elgin BIA has identified improvements to the Coulter Parkette as their first goal of their newly created strategic plan. As the BIA moves forward with implementing their goal to enhance the Coulter Parkette, it may be appropriate to negotiate an agreement similar to the flea market at that time.
Thank you, Linda. Then the recommendation is that the Port Elgin Farmers Market be deemed a place that is authorized under Section 2.4 of Bylaw 98-2004, being an exemption for individual vendors to obtain a business license. Any questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. The next item on the agenda, again, is the staff report, and it has to do with selling VQA wine at the farmers market. And again, I believe Clerk Linda White will present.
Thank you. So in 2014, the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario passed a regulation to allow a pilot project for 2 years to permit the sale and sampling of VQA wine at farmers markets in Ontario. I've included an information bullet with respect to the actual pilot project. To participate in this program, wineries must obtain authorization from the AGCO for an extension of their on-site winery retail store. The AGCO is responsible for conducting inspections of the VQA wine sales at farmers market as required and ensuring compliance of the regulation. The regulation gives the municipalities the ability to prohibit the sale of VQA wine at any or all farmers markets within their boundaries. If a municipality wishes to prohibit the sale of wine at the farmers market, it must do so in writing by filing an objection with the AGCO. In 2014, VQA wine was sold and samples were provided at the Port Elgin Farmers Market, and no concerns were brought to the municipality's attention. Based on last year's success, it is recommended that the municipality has no objection to Port Elgin's BIA request to allow VQA wine to be sold at the farmers market.
Thank you, Linda. Then the recommendation is that Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores has no objection to the VQA wine being sold and samples being offered at the Port Elgin Business Improvement Area's farmers market. Any questions or comments? All in favor then? That's carried. Thank you. Then the next item on the agenda is a staff report that has to do with purchase of used mechanical equipment for the pool, and our CAO, Larry Allison, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And at the outset, I want to indicate that although I'm the one speaking to this matter, this has been a collaborative effort of a number of the senior management staff, including our fire chief, who is the one that stumbled on this quite accidentally a number of weeks ago. In any event, the town of Caledon is decommissioning an equivalent-sized swimming pool to our Centennial Pool, as it is the oldest of their 4 pool facilities. Just prior to the decommissioning of the facility, all new mechanical equipment was installed to service the building and correct a long-term issue they were having at that time. The town had posted the surplus equipment on an online municipal auction site for sale. Our staff contacted them and expressed an interest in the equipment. And when we did so, they removed the equipment from the auction to allow us an opportunity to consider purchase. Staff have toured the pool facility in Caledon to view the equipment and have consulted with the original installation contractor to confirm the capacity and compatibility of the unit for our pool space. The equipment is all virtually brand new, as it was only in service a few hours following the completion of the installation in Caledon. Dectron International is the industry leader in dehumidification and heating in swimming pool environments. They are a Canadian company based in Montreal. They have specialized in this service for over 50 years, and their products have been recommended for our pool on several occasions. Dale Thermal Group is one of the few authorized Dectron dealers and installation contractors in the country. They are the original installer of the equipment at the pool and are very familiar with the equipment. Due to the extreme low usage of the used equipment, less than 20 hours overall, the manufacturer and the contractor will offer a full as-new 12-month warranty to the equipment should we choose to purchase it. Any change from the existing equipment or the installation of new Dryatron equipment requires a complete electrical retrofit of the primary service in our pool's mechanical room. The upgrade requires the installation of all new wiring and equipment and an increase in the capacity from the current 60 amp service to the required 150 amp service. The cost of the electrical improvements necessary to install the equipment has been quoted by a local electrician at a cost of approximately $21,000. We point out that previously commissioned pool studies have indicated an immediate need to replace the current equipment. Previous studies have provided a range of project costs which are shown in the chart that's attached. We have confirmed that the used equipment that we wish to acquire is appropriately sized and designed to operate at the desired temperature of 84 degrees. The unit recaptures the humidity and heat of the air in the pool space and reuses it to heat the pool water. The installation of a new natural gas boiler to accompany the HRV and Dryatron equipment will maximize efficiency and increase our independence from the school's aging mechanical systems. We point out that this will allow us to renegotiate energy costs with the school and be responsible finally for our own independently metered energy costs. This will allow us to have an accurate value of the overall cost of the operating the pool facility. The savings will be used to offset the cost of the equipment and installation in future years. And we'd also like to point out that any time we've had conversations about upgrades to mechanical systems with the folks at the school board, they have strongly encouraged the separation of these two utilities. For the recommended installation of the Dryatron unit in the same location as the existing unit, an all-aluminum corrosion-resistant engineered mezzanine or chair will be constructed to support the unit above the pool deck. This will allow for additional storage space under the unit. Physical installation of the equipment will require the removal and recommended installation of a new glass door and windows in the northwest corner of the pool deck area. The existing door is original to the building and requires repairs today. A new door and modern thermal pane glass windows will also increase energy efficiency slightly. A decision to proceed with this project is somewhat urgent, as work to decommission and remove the equipment must be completed before the end of the school year, as the current building housing the equipment must be demolished in early summer while the Caledon folks are out for their summer break. If approved, staff would make an effort to coordinate the work with the annual maintenance shutdown at our pool building. The new unit has the potential to dramatically increase air quality in the pool space, and staff has been regularly communicating to advise that the existing equipment is well past its life cycle. The continuation of aquatics program in the municipality is contingent on the existing system. If approved, the tank work completed in 2014, in combination with this proposed expenditure, would substantially diminish the current risk of a sudden mechanical failure, negatively impacting ongoing operations and future programming. In terms of financial impact, we again point out that Caledon has held these assets for our consideration on goodwill. We have not made a commitment to purchase at this time. There is the detail showing the proposed overall capital cost for the work, and it totals $212,500 altogether, including the electrical retrofit, the glass work, an accessible entrance, a contingency, and the removal of and installation of the equipment as has been described in the report. The project is not in the current 2015 capital budget. Should Council wish to proceed, staff recommends that the funds be borrowed from the Future Capital Projects Reserve and repaid over a period of 10 years from the pool operating budget. Staff estimate we will have a savings of approximately $10,000 each year in the current budget considering repairs and utilities. Thus, the operating costs for the pool would increase annually by approximately $10,000 in order to repay the reserve, which may be further offset through programming changes or enhancements or reviews of aquatics fees in future years. Staff also wish to point out that current year programming revenues may also be impacted if installation timeframes extend beyond the normal annual shutdown and commencement of activity in the fall is delayed. We had that issue to some degree in 2014 when the tank work extended the shutdown and programming was impacted. In summary, staff recognize that Council has, as part of the capital budget, already deliberated on providing further investment in the pool at this time, with the project originally proposed by staff not supported. We are returning for reconsideration of the issue based on the economies of scale associated with the potential to substitute virtually brand new used equipment at a fraction of the original cost, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Larry. Then the recommendation is that Council supports a 2015 capital budget amendment to add a project to purchase a used Dryatron dehumidification unit together with the associated mechanical equipment from the town of Caledon, and to retrofit of the electrical system and other facility alterations at Centennial Pool necessary to facilitate its installation. The Council authorizes the direct purchase of the required equipment from the town of Caledon at an upset amount not to exceed $40,000. The single source contract of installation of the mechanical equipment to Dale Thermal Group Incorporated, and the required electrical upgrades to BJS Electric of Southampton, as outlined in this report. Any questions or comments? Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I just wanted to thank the fire chief. He doesn't just keep his eye open for equipment that can be used by them, but for the whole community. So thanks, Phil.
Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And a good commendation, I agree. This is excellent. And I would also, the questions I have are, when, assuming that it gets approved, how long would it take? And it would be done right away or this summer? And the second question is, this equipment, just say we were to somehow in the future come to a decision to build a new aquatic facility, would there be a possibility that this equipment could be repurposed into a new facility, perhaps in conjunction with another piece of equipment, or would we write off at that point?
Perhaps I'll start with the second one first. In the event that there's a decision made to build a new facility, it is potentially able to move. It is able to accommodate a space much larger than the existing space, but that poses programming issues because you'd want to continue programming at the existing facility while you built a new one. But staff will also see the advantage of, if you choose to expand the existing space where you are, this unit could very easily, we believe, accommodate a much larger space and a second tank at that location.
To answer the question of timing, it's mostly time sensitive, as Caledon wants an answer and a commitment to remove the equipment as soon as the school year ends, so that deconstruction of their building can happen immediately. Installation of the equipment at our facility, provided our current Dryatron makes it that long, would be towards mid or late summer, when there's a scheduled shutdown of programs already.
Are we purchasing this from the school board or from the town? I take it, right?
The situation in Caledon is much like ours. The town of Caledon owns the equipment and the building. It's attached to school board property.
I see. I just might add one more thing just quickly. I think it might be appropriate for the mayor to write a letter to the town of Caledon expressing our appreciation for them giving us the opportunity to.
Certainly, when if we get it purchased, I think we can do that. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to completely paint the picture, because Larry raised it in his report about the previous recommendation that came up during the budget. That was, as you'll recall, a $900,000 proposal, which would have required outside borrowing to complete. At least that was the recommendation. So you could see the real difference in what we're looking at here today, and why it's such a good deal as compared to that, which was much more difficult. And what it's going to allow us to do is it's going to give us the breathing room we need in order to make more concrete decisions about the future of aquatics in Saugeen Shores and the future of that facility or whatever we're going to do. But it was clear and has been clear for many years that something needed to be done there. We put off the decision earlier this year and accelerated our decision-making process on the future of aquatics, but this is going to give us some more time and some more breathing room to make that decision and come to some conclusions and proceed however we're going to proceed. So it was excellent. And it's tremendous work by staff at all levels. And thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to echo the comments around the table and thank you, Phil, for. I mean, it's really a tremendous deal what you found. And I take a look back at the numbers. In 2008, from 435 to 700,000 in 2011 to 900,000, as our deputy mayor has alluded to, and 2014 budget, which we rejected, and we're coming in at 212,500. Again, to buy time, I think, is a smart thing to do. It keeps our doors open for the next 1, 2, 3 years, however long it takes for us to make that decision, whether we're retrofitting or building new or whatever we decide to do. It's a big ticket item, but I just wanted to thank you very much for that, Phil, and also, I think the fact that we're borrowing from future capital reserves and paying back over 10 years, financed through the pool budget, I just think it's a win-win. Whether we address that through higher user fees or however we determine that, we don't know yet. But I think the fact that we're paying it back over 10 years and replenishing our future capital reserve budget is, I just think it's a win-win. So thank you to staff.
Thank you for all those comments, and then I'll call the question. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any, that's carried. The next item on the agenda then is Environmental Services and Transportation Staff Report, and it has to do with Saugeen River Bridge repairs, and Stuart Doyle will present, our Director of Public Works.
Thank you. Very briefly, very similar to a project that we tendered last year that did come in over budget. We tendered out this project. We received 3 tenders back. Where are we here? Sorry, 2 tenders back. Reading the wrong report. And we're happy we can accommodate the prices this year. If approved, the project timelines will be confirmed at a later date, but we're anticipating June and be completed by July. It's anticipated we can keep 2 lanes of traffic open while we're doing the work, as most of the work's on the sidewalk, the underside of the sidewalk, and the outside of the bridge, repairing some downspouts and that type of thing. So the warning signage will be suspended below the underside of the structure to caution marine traffic. Again, the project was tendered in 2014, but came in over budget, so it was not approved, and council opted to defer the project till this year. We do have a note in here that we do anticipate some major rehabilitation on this structure within the next 5 to 10 years, and that timeline, the cost will be dependent on the subsequent bridge inspections that happen every other year.
Thanks, Stuart. Then the recommendation is that Allen Hastings Limited be awarded the contract for the Saugeen River Bridge Repair Project, tender number 2015-6320-5130, in the amount of $128,637 plus applicable HST, and that the Mayor and Clerk be authorized to sign the necessary tender documents. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Stuart, since you mentioned the sidewalks, if you could comment, perhaps, maybe you can't. The sidewalks that exist across the bridge, they're actually, they almost appear dangerous when you're walking because they're so high up. It's a safety thing. It's good, I guess, because it gives the cars a more definite track. But when you say they're going to be working on the sidewalks, is there any kind of adjustment going to happen to what it actually looks like right now that would be an advancement of safety concerns that maybe when it was done the first time it was a different kind of thought process? It's just, you know what I mean, and they're very high. And a lot of people ride their bikes on the sidewalk, and and when the wind's blowing, that height off the sidewalk is a little bit scary if you're walking or riding a bike on the sidewalk. I'm just curious if you have a comment.
So part of this project, all we're doing is rehabilitating this project, so repairing what's actually there. So any structural changes, any changes to the actual layout of the bridge would have to be done through a different project.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 questions, Stu. What do you know what accounts for the fairly major discrepancy between the two tenders? And a corollary question, has Alan Hastings done work for us before, and what's the record?
So, unfortunately with bridge work, there's only a limited amount of contractors, and depending on what their workload is that year, we see a correlation between that and the prices. We have worked with Alan Hastings before on projects from buildings to other bridge work, and we've got a good relationship with them.
He built this building we're sitting in, and the Plex. So, anyways, better not say any more about that. If there's no other questions, then all in favor of the recommendation. Opposed, if any, that's carried. Sometimes it's better to be quiet. Next item on the agenda is a staff report, and it has to do with the Port Elgin Farmers Market. And again, our Director of Public Works, Stuart Doyle, will present.
Thank you. The Port Elgin BAs once again submitted an application to host the Farmers Market in downtown Port Elgin this year. This will be the second year for the event in its current form, and their request has remained unchanged for the most part. The event is proposed to be held every Wednesday between June 3rd and September 30th between 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The event application requests that the Coulter Parkette be utilized and that Green Street be closed from Goderich Street to the BMTS alley during the hours of the market. The 2014 event was granted provisional permission to close Green Street, so the effect of the road closure could be monitored during the peak season. As noted in the information report at the previous meeting, Saugeen Shores Police Services and staff did not identify or notice any incidents, and the public feedback was minor, and the reaction was mixed. Also included in the information report was a summary of costs. These costs were primarily attributed to the detour signage that was used to address the beach route concerns that were noted in the event approval of 2014. Staff are recommending, in conjunction with the BIA, that the detour signing this year, we attempt without that and just have a closure marked at the start and the end of the event directly on Green Street. Insurance falls under the town's policy of the BIA as a Board of Council, and the emergency services will be notified of the weekly closure by our staff. Due to the proposed reduced requirements, there's very little financial impact.
Thank you, Stuart. Then the recommendation is that permission be granted to the BIA to close Green Street from Goderich Street westerly to the BMTS alley every Wednesday from June 3rd to September 30th to facilitate the farmers market. Questions or comments? Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I would like to ask is my own personal observations of the Easter weekend petting zoo and of the Christmas tree lighting, that we take this approach every time, that we block that piece every time. And I've seen too many young people naively or innocently step off the curb when a car has been going by when we didn't take that approach. And I'd like us to, if we can't think about it in every future staff report with every event that takes place there, I would like us to look for policy that says that we will think about it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think actually any of those special events there, Neil, I think that's a good, we can discuss that, and it should be brought to this council as a special events application, perhaps. If they asked us to close the road, correct, yeah. Okay, but Vice Deputy Mayor Heber.
Thank you. I still, as I said last year when this came up, I still think there's opportunities to consider activity and action and energy on the other side of the highway. So I guess if there's any opportunity to encourage the Port Elgin BIA to consider perhaps on July the 1st, which is a Wednesday this year, the idea of perhaps trying something on the other side, because maybe they could potentially be a longer period of time and just see how something might work on the opposite side of the highway. Because that would be, it's a Wednesday, but it's also a major holiday, and it might just set up something special about that particular time. So I'll certainly mention it when I get a chance. But I just, we have a letter further on in our council package from a resident who expresses concerns that I share those concerns, and certainly, the merits of the market are great. The idea of the market's great. The location has its challenges, though, and certainly it might be interesting to at least try something on the other side of the highway once this summer, just to see how that might work too. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Myatt. Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also read that piece of correspondence, and I really don't. I'm not in the same boat in terms of sharing that concern. I think that I'm going to be supporting this recommendation. I think we're seeing some really good stuff happening at Coulter Parkette. I think the BIA have come up with a strategic plan that calls for lots of new activity in downtown Port Elgin, and I think that they're working really hard to achieve that goal that is outlined in their strategic plan. And so I'll be supporting it as is. I think it's wonderful work what the BIA board is doing. I'd like to commend Jeff and his committee, and keep up the good work, and keep bringing the events in, and let's get our downtown promoted. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question. Has anybody looked at the impact of the street closure on the businesses north on Godrich Street, specifically BMTS? Have they noticed any adverse effects due to the farmers market because of whether it's increased traffic or less availability of people to get into their business?
I think Stuart can comment to that.
I had the same concern last year, and I didn't get the opportunity to speak to them directly, but through somebody else with the BIA, they indicated that they were in favor of that, and they were quite supportive, and they actually noticed some better business that day.
Councillor Rich.
And through, pardon me, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's fair to note that today we met with Mr. McGrath at Coulter Parkette, Councillor Minaj and Jeff Carver and myself and some others, and we discussed his concerns about the location, and I think that we came to an agreement that it'd be nice to let this progress as it is, and that the idea of closing off Green Street actually gives people a different opportunity to see some businesses in the downtown. And everything that I've received through the BIA has said that it has been a success, and the other businesses have noticed an improvement in their business.
Thanks for those comments. If there's nothing else, then I'll call the question. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda then is staff report with the Port Elgin BIA bike rack and planter installation. And again, our Director of Public Works, Stuart Doyle, will present.
Thank you. Another good project with the Port Elgin BIA here. They're requesting to install 20 new bike racks in downtown Port Elgin and replace the existing planting locations with new planters, all as indicated in the attached drawings. The BIA is seeking to purchase the desired bike racks and planters in accordance with the concepts contained within the approved Port Elgin branding toolkit. They are proposing the bike racks to be colored wave blue and the planters lifeguard white. Both these colors have identified in the document. Town approval is required because these new furniture is to be located on the road allowance, which is managed by the town. Town staff will be responsible for installing the bike racks. We've had some good discussions with the BA and the supplier of the bike racks that we can custom make them in order to allow them to be put in and removed annually, fairly simply. The cost to install the bike racks the first time is estimated at approximately $2,000. Additional operating costs will be incurred annually to install and remove the furniture. Planters, the town will also be placed the planters each spring in the designated locations, and the PIA will plant them as needed. The Port Elgin BIA will provide the initial capital funds required to purchase the street furniture. It's proposed the town would absorb the initial installation costs and the annual installation costs required to set up and remove the street furniture. It's estimated that $2,000 will be required for the initial installation.
Thank you, Stuart. Then the recommendation is that Council approves the installation of the identified bike racks and planters in the downtown Port Elgin. And a question from Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, more of a comment, and it's in support of this recommendation. As the former chair of the Parks and Trails Advisory Committee, this is something that we've recommended for a couple of years. And a lot of citizens have commented that it would be nice to have a better place other than a street pole or something to lock your bike to. So I think it's a great idea, and I commend both both the BIA and the town, and I support this recommendation.
I'll start with the Deputy Mayor, and we'll go down the road.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Mayor, I just want to say that I think that this report is reflective of a good, positive working relationship between the town's administration and the BIA. What you've done here is you've worked together, come up with a good plan, and figured out how to locate street furniture on the street in downtown Port Elgin in a way that's equitable to both parties, which is tremendous. And I want to thank all parties involved for their work on that front and for having come to this conclusion. It's great that the BIA is going to use the Port Elgin branding toolkit, which a lot of hard work went into, and which is great to see starting to roll out. I hope that we see more recommendations coming forward like this, where we can have solid partnerships between the municipality and the BIA, because things like this, it's a pretty small investment on both sides, but it's going to make a huge difference. And every one of we don't have to necessarily spend $1.5 million tearing up sidewalks and streets down there, although that would be nice. But in the interim, we can spend small amounts of money and have big wins, and this is one of those things. And so I just want to once again commend the administration and the BIA for having put this on our agenda. I'll certainly be voting in favor of it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple quick questions for Stu. Each of the bike racks, they will hold 1-2 bicycles. And it looks like there's, by the report, that there'll be 20. How many will be, where will they be spaced? From what street to what street? How many on each side? Whereabouts on the sidewalk are they located? How close to the road? Will they impede with vehicles opening doors, getting in and out, people? Just what's the accessibility of these?
Great question. So the bike racks will be situated between Elgin Street or Market, so somewhere Elgin or Market down to Ralph's Emma Street area. We're also looking at placing some of them on the side streets, specifically on Green and Mill. They will be located in the boulevard between the sidewalk and the road. So we'll have to place those, the idea would be line them up with the edge of parking spots, so the front and back of them instead of the middle, so when someone's parking, obviously they can open their door. We've run into that with garbage pail locations in the past. So we'll have to look at the placement a little carefully when we get to that, but they'll be spaced out enough that they won't clutter too much, I hope.
One further question. With both the Southampton and Port Elgin BIAs looking at bike racks for both towns, are we looking at something similar? Are both BIAs purchasing from the same vendor, or do we have different ideas because of the size of streets?
So I haven't been in contact or talks with the Southampton BIA with specific options on street furniture, but certainly that will be determined in the 2 branding toolkits, which are different, and also the 2 streetscape designs, which are different. So we'll have to look at those documents when we reference that.
Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just a comment and a question, I guess, of our Director of Public Works, if I could. But I see 4 reports on here this evening relating to the great work the BIA board and staff are doing, working together in a cooperative manner. And so I see relationships, being built, and maybe we got off to a little bit of a shaky start last December, but I think we've come a whole long ways. I think that's the way it should operate. So I commend both administration and our BIA board for working together and moving forward with some of these projects. So thanks to both parties for what's happening. I guess my question, though, and I do support bike racks. The direction we're heading, Stu, and to the BIA board. So I fully support the motion. My question, though, is we're seeing a lot of new fixtures being placed on our sidewalks in Port Elgin, which aren't, our sidewalks aren't that wide. It relates to snow removal in the wintertime, and I just wondering, with the amount of, whether they're planters or bike racks, whatever they may be, at what point, Stu, do we reach that threshold where it becomes an issue with our winter snow removal, or is it an issue? That's the question I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So within last year and this year, we'll be placing a significant amount of trees and street lights. There's existing garbage cans. There's other issues down there. So on 2 blocks downtown after this year between Elgin and Green, we'll be getting close to that, where snow removal is becoming significantly more difficult in those particular areas due to all the obstacles. So at some point, we have to keep in mind when we're putting things in, such as bike racks, benches, garbage cans, that removing them in the fall is important, and also when we're placing new infrastructure down there to keep that in mind. But certainly, these blocks getting more infrastructure on them, it's certainly pressing and adding time to that operation each day.
If there's no further questions, then all in favor of the recommendation. Opposed, if any. That's carried. So there's, Stuart has one more report on environmental services and transportation. It's the Master Sewer Water and Sewer Master Plan for 2014. Go ahead.
Very briefly, we had a presentation a few months ago from our from Steve Burns at BM Ross presenting this report. This is just the final step. We've advertised for project completion. There's a public consultation summary there. It's also included in the report, and based on this report will come recommendations at future council or future budget processes in conjunction with this report. So it won't be specifically to do with this report, but we'll take that into account when we're making those recommendations.
Thank you, Stuart. Then the recommendation is that Council adopts the Water and Sanitary Sewer Servicing Master Plan for 2014 report. And a question from Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick one. Is the EA, was it an EA, that's going to change the outflow pipe from the wastewater treatment plant in Port Elgin from the Saugeen River back to Mill Creek? Is this inside this, or is it still separated from this?
I think Stuart can answer that for you.
This is the master plan. The EA is a separate document that will be coming in at a later date.
Further questions, comments? All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So the next item then is a staff report, and it has to do, it's a planning and development staff report, and it has to do with cash in lieu of parking, and our manager of development, Bart Toby, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cash in lieu of parking. Planning Act allows municipalities to establish cash in lieu of parking bylaw. The existing bylaw was created in 2001. Where developers of apartments and motel units in the commercial powers zone cannot provide necessary parking, this bylaw allows council's discretion to developer to pay cash in lieu parking spaces as needed. Staff is proposing indexing the original figure of $1,000 approved by bylaw 228/2001 to inflation, and furthermore continuing indexing cash in lieu parking spaces with inflation for future years. In 2015, cash in lieu of parking will be $1,556 if the proposal is approved.
Thank you, Bart. Then the recommendation is that Council considers an amendment to Bylaw 28-2001, being the cash in lieu of parking bylaw to 1. Set the rate for cash in lieu of parking at $1,556 in circumstances in which Council grants an exemption to the town's parking requirements. And 2, allow for indexing of the rate to be collected. And 3, limit the circumstances in which cash in lieu parking would be considered to lands within the core commercial core zone only. Questions or comments? All in favor of the recommendation? That's carried. The next item on the agenda is the Community Services, Parks and Recreation Staff Report, and it has to do with the Southampton Beach Safety Buoys, and our Director of Community Services, Jane Jagielowski, will present.
Thank you. Yes, this particular report is makes reference to the vicinity of the Chantry Dunes, which is just south of Jerry's Fry's location. It's been a mecca for both recreational swimmers and anchored boats for a number of years. In order to protect swimmers in this location, staff is recommending that 5 markers be installed and removed seasonally. It is recommended that the markers be strategically placed, and I've indicated those locations that they should be placed. This process shall be reassessed annually for positioning. The placement will ensure the safety and awareness for recreational swimmers, separating the boating traffic from the swimming area. The recommended area will be similar to that for the long-established safe swim zone area at the Port Elgin Main Beach area. While not enforceable, watercraft users have historically respected this zone and operated outside of the zone or passed through at a very low rate of speed, being aware of the swimmers in the area. As recommended by the Life Saving Society waterfront guidelines, that signage and 2 life-saving stations installed 80 meters apart be mounted in the vicinity that indicates supervision is not provided, as well as the emergency location information. It's also recommended in the waterfront master plan that Saugeen Shores continues to use the blue flag criteria along their 18 kilometers of waterfront. The signage and the life-saving station is in keeping with the blue flag standards. The Saugeen Shores Fire Department has agreed to assist with the installation and removal of the buoys, and this will be done seasonally in cooperation with the aquatic supervisor and the aquatic staff. This task will be included in the Fire Department's training for waterfront emergencies and water rescue, and will be completed when weather conditions are favorable. In keeping with our remaining life-saving stations currently positioned along our waterfront, staff inspects and documents the inspection 4 times a year. These additional stations will be added to our current complement. Staff will continue to practice the recommendations as outlined in the Life Saving Society waterfront guidelines. Photographs below are examples of a lifeguard station that we currently have at the harbor in Port Elgin. And it also is an example of the buoy that we have at the Port Elgin waterfront as well. Staff has reviewed this proposal with the Southampton Residents Association, and they are pleased with the recommendation in ensuring that the waterfront is safe for all patrons. And our financial impact will be approximately $3,475.
Thank you, Jean. Then the recommendation is the council supports the recommendation to position 5 buoys at the Southampton Beach to define a safe swim zone where watercraft are restricted in operation. Questions or comments? Start with Councillor Mayette and Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Thanks for bringing this forward. Jane, I'm just wondering, what was the catalyst that started this going? Was there any incidents with boats? And I heard you say that boats will still be able to go in there. They just have to be more cautious when they go by these buoys, because I know it's a favorite thing for boaters to boat over and wade in and get some Jerry's fries as well in the summertime. But was there, did the Beachers Association bring this forward to you, or was there a advisory committee that brought this forward, or was it?
So your first question is if we've had an incident there. No, we have not. But we certainly have recognized the fact that we have an increased number of boaters that tend to raft in that vicinity, and obviously we have increased users on our beach. Combination of the two, we wanted to ensure that we provided a safe haven, I'll say, for both users. I have had conversations with the Residents Association last year, and it certainly was identified as part of an informal recommendation. So there's been a number of variables that has certainly brought this to our attention. We as staff have also identified that it is an issue. We don't want to have an incident there. So being a little proactive and wanting to do buoys, we respect the fact that in Port Elgin, at the Port Elgin Main Beach, it has been policy.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jane. I am delighted to see this because I've used that beach for many years and it has been a problem. It's been a concern that, when you've got lots of little kids and boats and people bringing in sea-doos, and even I've had a couple of people tell me, I haven't witnessed this, but tell me that they've seen people gassing up their sea-doos from the beach. That's a concern for protecting the quality of our water as well. So I'm really happy with this initiative, and thank you.
Any other questions? Then all in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So the next item we have is the Protective Services staff report, and it has to do with the installation of electric vehicle charging stations. And our Fire Chief, Phil Eagleson, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bruce Power and its partner Plug-in Drive has proposed to provide Saugeen Shores with 2 single-wand charging units at an estimated value of $6,500 each, which includes the unit itself, first year of annual network access fees, a one-time network license fee, 2 years warranty, shipping, the manual, and the wrap or graphics that would accompany the units. Total sponsorship is estimated to be $13,600. I've outlined in the report what Bruce Power would agree to and what we would be responsible for. If the recommended project is approved, Saugeen Shores would be the first municipality to benefit from the Bruce Power sponsorship. Bruce Power will continue to seek appropriate host locations in Grey Bruce and Huron counties who want to work together to help expand charging infrastructure in our area. There has been some interest by conservation authorities and provincial parks also. The purpose of this initiative is to create a network of electric vehicle charging units to demonstrate the use of electric vehicles in the area is possible and practical. I should note that this is part of the recently announced $400,000 environmental initiative fund from Bruce Power. This is one of their bigger parts of that fund. Staff at the Saugeen Shores Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Office have been consulted and are supportive of this initiative. It is also believed hosting of electric vehicle road trips may be a tourism trend in future years. Prior to installation or shortly thereafterwards, if approved, staff would recommend amending the Saugeen Shores parking bylaw to restrict the parking spaces to electric vehicles only and provide a definition of what an electric vehicle is. Staff are recommending locating the charging pedestals in close proximity to the Visitors Information Center in Southampton and Port Elgin, downtown core areas. Recommended locations are the most cost-effective for installation immediately. Relocation of the charging units could be considered as projects in other areas are completed in future years. If approved, staff are hopeful the charging stations can be installed and operational before July 1st. The recommended locations are north of the Chamber building on Emma Street in the corner of Emma and Goderich, and on High Street in front of the Town Hall area on 201 High Street. Financial impact, installation costs including labor and materials of both pedestals is estimated at $2,000 each. Total project cost not to exceed $4,000 and will be funded from future capital projects reserve. The cost of electricity in future years will be recovered from users of the charging stations. Following the first year of operation, ongoing annual service fees or networking fees will be $300 per station for the year. Annual fees for both units will be a total of $600 plus HST and will be included in future operating budgets, first partially in 2016 and then in whole in 2017. Staff will look for sponsorship opportunities to recover the annual service fees of the charging stations in future years.
Thanks, Philip. Then the recommendation is that staff be authorized to proceed with the installation of 2 Eaton electric vehicle charging stations at locations in downtown areas of Southampton and Port Elgin. And furthermore, that Saugeen Shores parking bylaw be updated to provide a definition for electric vehicles and restrict designated parking spaces to electric vehicles only at all times. Questions or comments? Start right, Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was hard to tell, Phil, from the drawing how big the unit actually is. Where this is in Southampton, there's already a big metal box right there that's for the traffic signals. Is it about the same height? Do you have any sense of that? It's just, I'm just kind of curious. I understand the reason behind thinking that that's a good location. However, that's a pretty well-used area of Southampton for people in and out of the library, and there's already a lot of infrastructure right there. That is it going to fit into that area, or is it going to clutter it up even more? Because I do think it's the wave of the future, so to speak, and people that require these kinds of services will very quickly know where they are. So, I appreciate the educational value of like right there, but I'm just curious, is the size of the box at all going to just take up a lot more room in that area?
I don't think so. They're small in nature, and I don't know how best to describe them. The picture I provided is actually a 2-1 station, and what we're considering is a single 1 station, half the size. Nowhere near the size of the metal box there. I would guess at 9 inches wide and about 38 inches tall.
I had somebody ask me who had actually read the report online too. There's a little bit of confusion. The people who actually use this, I'm assuming they somehow put in a credit card to pay for the power. Is that how it works? Because there was concern that, are we going to be paying for the power?
No, the power is very minimal. So on a typical vehicle charge will take about 2 hours, or what I like to think of as a supper on our main street. But it could be 17 to 20 cents per charge. However, we won't pay for that. It will be metered by the pedestal. That's why those service fees are needed annually for the handling of the money, if you will. Typically, the people that buy electric vehicles are very technologically savvy, and smartphones. So they wave their smartphone in front of it, and it has a code that activates the pedestal. Should we choose to want to get a credit card, which are not very often used, it's an add-on of $400 that we could add on that. But they typically have an app that connects them with the phone. It lets them know when their car is done charging, when they're at the restaurant or shopping, and they just wave it, and it bills that way.
I think Councillor Grace, no? Okay, Councillor Dave Mayap.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I also think it's a great idea, and it's the wave of the future, and I'm all for it. My question is also around the locations, and I do understand that it takes some time. It's not like pulling up at a gas station. You have to park and hopefully go for supper. And I just thought that maybe, and I wonder if the Plex was considered as a location, because it's kind of an out-of-the-way place. You're not taking a prime parking space from downtown, and it also might facilitate some opportunity for the town to be a leader in this area and purchase at some point a electric vehicle to replace another vehicle.
Absolutely. I think there's opportunities through Bruce Power's program to even get additional stations if needed. If we see a need or a user that's going to use electric vehicles a lot. Senior staff really consulted over where they should go or where they could go. One of our priorities was not in sacrificing existing parking spots wherever possible. So in Port Elgin, we're moving some planters and creating 2 new spots to accommodate this, so we're not taking from the main street parking. I strongly suspect that it'll be a decision of council to try these in different locations in future years. We are recommending these 2 locations as electrical work is needed in those areas, and we can get them installed virtually not cost free, but the most cost effective, if you will. If we renovate a park or we want to try it somewhere else where electrical work is being done, we could consider moving them.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The picture depicts what looks like to be an automobile, and I understand it says we're going to better define electric vehicle, and I would ask that we accelerate that definition and the understanding of exactly what we mean by electric vehicle, and make sure that we pass that complementary bylaw not too long after the fact, but maybe before the fact.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my view of the future of this is slightly different than the fire chief's, in that I hope that the municipality isn't a player in this for very much longer. My hope would be that at some point the private sector picks this up and they start making money at it and we stop doing it. In the meantime, I guess, do we have any kind of arrangement with Bruce Power as a result of the funding arrangement here, or have we had to sign any sort of deal along that same vein that we have to keep these for any particular length of time or something? I mean, your report's quite interesting in that it shows how this happened with petroleum, with gasoline, and how, I mean, the government may have to be involved at the initial stages, but we all know what happened with gasoline, right? So I guess the question is, do we have to keep these for a certain amount of time, or if the private sector does get into this business, are we at liberty to get out of it whenever we want?
No, there's no agreement on a time frame where they'd expect us to keep them active, if you will. There is some verbiage too, if we decide to not support them anymore, try to find a private sector location, a business owner or a private industry that may want to take them over from us. There's verbiage to that.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, then, all in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So, what we have now is 5 pieces of communication for Committee of the Whole action. The first is from Sylvia Jones, MPP for Dufferin-Caledon, respecting a private member's Bill 36, Private Property Act, and I look for some direction.
I made comment to this the last council meeting, and I'd just like to reiterate that I am in support of updating this antiquated legislation, particularly for the residents in the Saugeen ward who quite often have tracts of land that are not necessarily supervised 100% of the time. This is an issue, and I think that having a minimum level of fine puts a bit of teeth into the legislation, and I fully support it.
So and normally how we do this is that there's a mover and a seconder, and then we'll call a vote on each individual item. So if you are moving to support as a seconder, Councillor Malazan, is there any other discussion on it? You can go ahead.
Ask a question of you, Mr. Mayor. Point of clarification. This would be to send a letter of support to Sylvia Jones. Is that what we're voting on?
That's my understanding. The other option is you can individually do this, but if there's a motion here, we'll call the question on that, then all in favor of it. So we will support that, so we'll send a letter to them. The next item on the agenda is Saugeen Shores, and I think this really, looking for direction. Saugeen Shores Police Service policing costs to South Bruce Peninsula, and there's a question around it. Maybe you can speak to it, the Deputy Mayor, the Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I mean, the reason why this is before council is because the Police Services Board is of the view that the Police Services Act gives the authority to council to determine how the municipality is policed. So what you have here is a letter from the chief outlining a recommendation from the Police Services Board with regard to this request from South Bruce Peninsula, but it is the view of the board that if there was to be a change in how the service is managed, or if there was a decision around the expansion of the service, that decision would be council's to make. So with regard to that, as you can see, the board's recommendation is that council does not provide a costing to South Bruce Peninsula at this time, and that is really because of the situation around policing at this moment across the province. There's a lot of uncertainty. We have the new OPP billing model, which is relatively new, and the board is of the opinion its full effects have not yet been felt, or we cannot yet know what they are. More time is required to understand that. The framework agreements with Section 31 boards like Saugeen Shores, are under review. The OPP provides us service under those framework agreements, and they're currently reviewing them, and we don't know the outcome of that. There's also a lot taking place. You may have seen there was a report just today from AMO on policing and the modernization of policing, and they had a panel put together on that, and some recommendations came out of that, which we're absorbing now. And then also in the last couple of weeks, we've seen the result of some fairly groundbreaking collective bargaining at the City of Toronto, which is, I think, undertaking a great deal of change in the sector. So there's a lot of change, there's a lot of flux, and I think as a result of that, it's would be very difficult for the police service to provide an accurate costing, taking into account the costs and impacts of any expansion of the service. And it would also be very difficult, we think, to provide any kind of apples-to-apples comparison with any other service model, the OPP or any other model at this time. That's not to say this is something we should never consider, because there is the potential for economies of scale, but it is something that the board does not recommend council proceed with at this time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mark. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau, I don't know if the chief's in the audience, and if you want to comment, or you're fine with what's been said, or I don't want to put you on the spot. But we're getting very close to the end of committee of the whole here, so thanks very much. Councillor Minaj.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. It is a large budget item for us, and there are sometimes economies of scale, and we heard from West Ontario Power about opportunities to amalgamate and to change the landscape. So I would hope that we keep this on the radar, and we ask for a follow-up report, if not for this budget year coming, maybe for the budget year in 2017, so that we don't lose the interest and we don't lose an opportunity.
Okay, then I guess then the direction for this is we accept, and otherwise we accept the position of the board, and we'll move to the next item on the agenda. I guess we'll need a motion to do that. If you want to move it, and then seconded by the Vice Deputy Mayor, all in favor. That's carried. The next item on the agenda then is a municipality Brockton, West Ontario disconnect policy, and again, some direction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This recommendation from Brockton requests that they review and amend the disconnect policy. I'm not sure it has to be that specific, which is why I'm a little uncomfortable with the Brockton recommendation. My view is that what I suggested to the representatives from West Ontario today is that some opportunity to work together with the shareholders, perhaps the county governments, United Way, to look at options or alternatives would be the right way to go. I think that the dissatisfaction out there is with regard to the sort of stated policy that West Ontario has without much dialogue back and forth. I think that's what Brockton's expressing. So I think, Mr. Mayor, I would move support of the Brockton motion, but I don't think it necessarily has to end there. But I'll move support.
Okay, it was seconded by Councillor Grace. Any further discussion? Before we do that, we're past 10 o'clock now. I need a motion so that we continue committee of the whole. Moved by Vice Deputy Mayor Huber, seconder, Councillor Madison. All in favor? Okay. So, comments? Who has the comment here? Start with Councillor Minaj.
So, after the presentation, I agree with Deputy Mayor Luc Charbonneau that we ought to clarify that we're in support in general terms, but specifically we would like that opportunity to work with West Ontario Power at the improvements that were discussed here in this room.
Councillor Myatt, Dave Myatt.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a little bit hesitant I'm not sure the need to pass a motion to send support to Brockton. I think we can accept their information. They've done this courtesy of sending along their motion, and I too was contemplating a similar notice of motion, and I still am. And I'm glad. And the reason that I waited was I wanted to hear the presentation from West Ontario and get a sense of where the CEO Milne was at, where her head was at with it, and I intend to bring a notice of motion that may be worded a little bit differently than the Brockton motion that we can consider on its own accord. And for that reason, I need to be convinced a little bit more as to why we have to pass a motion to support this.
I'd agree with you, because I think that the CEO and the board chair are well aware that there's an issue around disconnection. Whether we pass 4 or 5 or 10 motions, I don't think are going to raise that level anymore. They're well aware of the situation and the I guess whether it's dissatisfaction or whether there's concern in a number of communities and from their board people. So, I mean, we can pass this motion and pass other motions, but I don't think they're well aware of the issue. And I'm not sure that 1 or 2 or 3 more motions are going to change that, but we can do what we want. And I'll go here with the Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was actually going to, ahead of the Deputy Mayor, I was going to move to note and file, which, I don't believe we've actually had this part of an agenda in a big way since the new council was elected. So I just feel like you that it is an issue. There's an awareness of the issue, and with limitations of the existing motion, I think it's a situation where I can't support it because I don't agree with everything in it. But noting in file is another option for us. Thank you.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you. I was not satisfied with some of the answers, in particular when I asked the question about vulnerable individuals in a situation where people are living and the power is disconnected, and the answer was that they are required to make an exception in the case of somebody getting support from their medical professional. And I think very often the people we're talking about here, there may be children, there may be elderly or other vulnerable people who either aren't organized enough to get that kind of documentation, may not be, aware or capable of doing that. And so I really think that I either want a further discussion. I'm not satisfied with just leaving it this way. If noting and filing means that we're going to continue the discussion, that's great. Thank you.
Well, the motion has been moved and seconded, and it's really that they amend their policy to be consistent with what Hydro One's disconnect policy is. So that's the question we have before us. I mean, those other issues we can bring on at a later date, but this is the motion, and I think we should kind of confine our statements to this motion. If you want to bring something later, by all means do that. Go ahead, Councillor Myatt, and I think we'll call the question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You raise a good point that they're asking to compare it with the Hydro One policy, and we haven't reviewed the Hydro One policy. The Hydro One policy is one of putting a load restriction device on there, which are, I didn't get an answer to my question, or the question that was raised tonight on that, but they're expensive and the technology isn't necessarily readily available. But I think that the mover should consider changing his motion to just say note and file, and then that, like I indicated earlier, I intend to bring something forward that may address more specifically what our issues are.
Okay. Did you have a question, Mike, or a comment?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I support what you're saying, Councillor Matt, and I can't support the motion as proposed by our deputy mayor. I think I also need more information, and I just think that I liked our deputy mayor's comment earlier about consultation with the 9 shareholders in West Ontario Power. I like that, and I won't be able to support the motion.
Okay, I think unless you want, the motion's on the table, and I'll go back to the mover if you want to leave it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's important that this council has not spoken with a unified voice on this subject, and it's important that we do at some point, and I suspect that we will. But I generally agree with the comments that you all have made and don't see any need to move forward at this moment. If there's more coming, but it is important that we do make a statement on this as a shareholder in West Ontario Power, and if we are going to do that, then let's do it our way. I'll withdraw the motion.
Thank you. Is everyone fine with that? Is the seconder fine with that? Okay, then. I'll have a motion to note and file. So, you'll move? Seconded by Mike Myatt. All in favor? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda is a letter, I guess, from Wayne McGrath, who is a resident of Reed, the Farmers Market. And I guess what he's asking, fairly lengthy, but...
Mr. Mayor, in view of the, in light of the fact, I think we discussed in fair good detail tonight, Farmers Market, closing of the street. There were some comments moving across. I'd like to make a motion that we note and file.
Second, okay. Your comment, Councillor Minaj?
Yes, I do. Thank you. But I understand that, and I, with due respect for expediency, I would like to note that Wayne, when we discussed it with Wayne, he was happy with our discussions. Just wanted to reiterate that, so that his point was made and understood, and the discussion was a good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And all in favor of note and filing. And The final piece is a letter from Patrick Gibbons, a request for an open forum. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I generally agree with the comments about open forums, as it was mentioned in the letter itself, something I raised during the election, and I think it's something that we should talk about. And my suggestion, Mr. Mayor, would be that we refer this to the Striking Committee. The Striking Committee now has the authority to review the procedural bylaw, and my understanding is that review is imminent, about to take place, and so I think the best thing to do would be to refer to the committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So we have he's moved a motion to refer. A seconder for that? Councillor Mike Myatt. Any discussion? Councillor Menage.
I just wanted to ask, Mr. Mayor, thank you, to hear that piece again. The Striking Committee is going to review the procedural bylaw, or we're all going to get a chance to comment on the procedural bylaw changes?
You will all get a chance to comment on it. The procedural bylaw says that the Striking Committee will review it and make a recommendation for discussion here at the Committee of the Whole. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was one of my questions, to clarify that Council had input. I believe that it's a good idea to allow people to have an open forum. From observing its practice, and when it was initiated with the DGR CLC, I think it worked well. It didn't seem like it was abused, and so I think that this would be a great step forward. Thank you.
A quick comment. I support Mr. Gibbons' request to have the more open public forum prior to meeting, whether it's 10 or 15 minutes before a council meeting. I think it's an interesting idea, and it's a good idea. And but I just, as a seconder to the motion, the question I have was, maybe through the clerk, Striking Committee, around timing, so this isn't delayed too long. When would we expect to see a review of the procedure bylaw? We say it's pending, but is it 2 weeks, a month, 3 months? When are we looking at it?
The Striking Committee will receive it this Wednesday.
Oh, that's soon then. Okay, thank you.
Okay, then the motion to refer, all in favor? That's carried. There's some information there on OGRA heads-up alert. It's there. There's 4 department information reports. I don't know if you want to comment on them, any of them. Any department head would like, if you have no comments to them, is any questions? Go ahead.
And I wanted to thank Jane. I did request an information report to do with Lake Ridge, and I like the contents of the report. I think it's well detailed, and I still do have a bit of a concern with the usage of that new piece of playground equipment, the fitness stations put in at Lake Ridge, and I've talked to the Director of Community Services about it. You're well aware of it, and neighbors aren't real thrilled about the level of usage there, and probably maybe a need for different type of equipment in that park. But it was more of a compliment to the Director. Thank you for your report, Jane, and I'm sure the residents who will receive a copy of this report will be. Should be very well pleased with the contents. So I just wanted to pass that thank you on.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, either to the CAO or to the Chief Building Officer, perhaps a comment for the benefit of Council. The information item number 2 about the site plan for the Max convenience store in Port Elgin. Perhaps a comment for all of us as to how we can participate in site plan activity, because it's been moving along, but there is no actual site plan here yet for us to review. Could you just make a comment about how Council has a chance to make comments or be involved in that process?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is our attempt to give Council a heads up early when we get complete applications for site plans. Typically, if it does not involve a rezoning or minor variance application, the Planning Advisory Committee would not be involved. Council will see a staff recommendation to approve the site plan when it completes its normal internal review process. Meanwhile, between now and then, if there's an interest in a specific one, you're welcome to drop into the office and speak to the development coordinator.
We're in the binder. So, other comments here?
A new one,
Councillor Menage.
Mr.
Go ahead.
The street light pole replacement and the number of residents that have made requests. You can walk in a couple, 3 blocks in the community, and you can find upwards of 5 or 6 different streetlight poles, from wood to all the way to ornamental and everything in between. And I wonder if there's an opportunity, if we've got a standard, could I get the standard information that we are now following a new standard, and how many of these upscale or newer subdivisions that have got the ornamental light that runs at approximately $2,000 a piece, I understand. If a untoward truck was to strike one and demolish it, somehow slid through in the wintertime, how many replacements do we have on hand for those? And so what I'm asking, and I guess what I'm interested in knowing, is could we have a staff report that speaks to community improvement opportunities where local residents could say, we understand that a wooden pole is $300, $400, $500, and something more special that they would like in their particular neighborhood is going to cost $1,500, and that the 5 neighbors are going to foot $200 a piece and come up with the other additional $1,000 to install something that would be more suitable for their particular community. Can we ask for that kind of a report, or is that too much to ask?
We currently have 2 concrete poles in stock for replacement, and we could do a survey of the local residents to see who would be in favor of a community improvement or a local improvement charge for this type of application, and report back to council with those findings.
Thanks, Dirk.
Mayor, my question also is about the streetlight, the poles. The author of this letter raises the issue of longevity. So, Stuart, could you give us a general idea? What's the concrete per wooden lifespan estimate?
That answer depends greatly on which person you're asking and who sells what. So, generally we're looking at 40 to 50 years for a wooden pole. Literature based on concrete will somewhere say the same, with caveats in both sides of it. So generally the industry looks at they're fairly comparable in strictly lifespan.
Okay, Councillor Rich.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Stu, so I know we talked a little bit about this because I had some correspondence as well. So if we're going to look at polling residents, does that mean, I know that some of the polls have already started to go up, and how does that affect what we're trying to do currently?
That's an interesting question. We'll have to determine whether we would like to poll all the residents as part of this project, or just a specific street just brought a petition forward tonight. So that'd be something I'll have to discuss with the CEO and see how we want to proceed with that, or pending council's further direction.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just important to note that the municipality has been undertaking, well, West Ontario Power and the municipality have been undertaking these pole trans conversions for, before I was on council, forever, and well, for a very long time anyway. And it's important just to be clear that, I mean, Councilman Minaj talked about the new standard. This is not a new standard with regard to these pole trans. All along, the municipality has been replacing those poles with wooden poles. And it has been controversial a couple of times, and each time it's been reviewed. And in each of those occasions, the municipality decided to stick with the wooden poles that have been rolling out all along. And so we have done this for a long time, and many neighborhoods throughout the town of Port Elgin have been converted in this way. And so I think it's just important to note that before we as we move forward here. I think, and in the last iteration of this, over on the southeast side of Port Elgin, when we last talked about this, the local improvement issue was put on the table, and I think can be again in this scenario. And that's not a bad idea. It's not a bad compromise to offer to a neighborhood. if they're interested in that, but it will be expensive, and it will be expensive to each property owner because it's a very expensive upgrade. And that's why the municipality is in the position it has been all along in terms of making the change to wood. So I'd support going back to those residents and asking them if they'd like to do the local improvement. And I just wanted to clarify some of that information. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think Stuart's got a comment, and one perhaps final comment on this issue.
Yes, sorry. So just to clarify, we are doing approximately 5 different streets, as Councillor Rich alluded to. We've only received petitions from those on one specific street. So the one question is, do we send questions to all the projects? Second item is we have 2 additional projects with Wisteria Power this year that will include another 20 poles. And do we want to look at that same issue for those? This would be a significant amount of information to gather in a short period of time, but I would respectfully request some direction on that.
Comment? Go ahead.
Well, I believe the conversation started with Councillor Minaj asking us a policy question about future applications and whether we wanted to create an opportunity for future local improvements. I'm not sure that in the midst of this project we're going to be able to accommodate that, as Stuart's respectfully trying to indicate to us.
Okay. Okay.
I think where there's an opportunity, where if we're still days away, if we're still weeks away, if it's not going to interrupt a big project and it's going to cost lots of extra money, and we could quickly reply to their emails and say, you have an option. The option is a $2,000 change, and the option is you and 4 or 5 neighbors are going to have to split the cost for it. I don't know why that would take so much time to do.
Well, I don't want to belabor this an awful lot but I think, go ahead. I think what you're going to end up with, certainly some of those people are going to say no. So you're going to end up back here at this table deciding, is it 51% or is it 41% or what it is? And then you're going to have to either force it on those people that don't want it or stick with the standard that we've had for many, many years. So there's your options.
So just a quick note, there's about 78 properties along Parkwood in the area of that, so we would have to go to each one of those owners, not just the specific ones who have sent in a petition. So we have to send out 7 or 8 letters just for this particular street, whether there's 4 other ones that we would have to deal with as well, pending direction.
So perhaps I think, I don't want to belabor this. So when are you going to start these things? So we've already started. So realistically, we're not going to get around to it unless you stop the project now.
So the project as of Thursday was put on hold. The company has left town. They had graciously given us a week to make a decision before they came back. They're a good company that I can work with. So pending council's direction, I can certainly come up with some options, but the time is certainly tight.
Deputy Mayor Hewer.
I just wanted to ask the Director of Public Works, I know you send letters out. Have letters gone to every single street that's affected, or is it just the Parkwood people that got the letter in advance already? Or have they all been sent?
So approximately 90 letters were sent out to each property that had a pole on or adjacent to their property. So usually the poles are placed on a property line. So the property to the left or right, east, west, north, south, whatever side, would have received a letter. Not every property in the neighborhood, but every property with a pole adjacent to their property. On every project.
Every project. And the reality is the reaction has pretty much been from one street.
Exclusively.
So I guess if we're looking for a solution, maybe there's a compromise here. If there's only one street that's really raised this concern, maybe that's the street you mail, and perhaps you can do it. We can put it off for 2 weeks to the next meeting or so. But I think, you've got to have some policy on this because, like I say, if you end up with half of them saying yes, or 30% saying yes, and 70% saying no, somebody else should be paying for it, then I think it's going to come back to this council to decide. And I think, in any case, you want to try, go ahead.
I brought it only forward to give them an option. I would ask for 100% agreement. If there's not 100% agreement for the light pole that's surrounded by those residents, and that may be the most difficult part to ascertain, is there 6, 5, 4, how many residents are directly affected. But for me, it's 100%. You're all in and you get the change. If you're not, then we're not doing it.
I think you can send a letter out like that, Stuart, and ask for a reply.
Yep.
Are you satisfied with that?
Just Parkwood, and we'll continue with the project for the other streets.
I would say.
Understood.
Okay. Okay. So that's the end of our agenda, and I think given the lateness of the evening, I think we'll take a motion to adjourn. The Deputy Mayor and Councillor Rich, all in favor. So can we reconvene at 10:35?